Hello. Welcome to my channel Touching Stories. You're about to hear an amazing story about love and unexpected decisions. Enjoy watching.
Samantha was on her way home for vacation in her small town, which was located near Dallas. The girl was in her third year at an economic institute and dreamed of becoming an accountant in the future. Samantha anticipated the joy of meeting her parents, and she also thought about how she would tell her mother and father that they would soon become grandparents. As soon as the girl thought about her pregnancy, her face frowned. Samantha found out about it a week ago, and at first she was happy about the event. The girl immediately decided to notify her chosen one that he would soon become a father. With a young man Samantha met at the skating rink in Dallas, she accidentally ran over a guy and knocked him down while skating. 25-year-old Steve found himself on the ice laughing from this fall, and the girl was embarrassed that she had so ridiculously run over the man. Steve, seeing Samantha's embarrassment, said cheekily, "Why are you blushing like a shy girl? Not everyone here is an excellent skater, and quite often there are such collisions on the ice. Better let's get up and skate together. It's my first time here, although I am from this city. It's my third time here. My classmate invited me once. I went and liked it, so I come here occasionally," Samantha said, getting to her feet. "So you study here? A student, I take it," the boy said with a smile. "That's right. Soon there will be one more accountant in the country," said the girl. After that, the young people got acquainted, and after the skating rink, they sat in a cozy cafe and talked nicely. Since then, they called each other for a few days and then started to meet. A month after meeting, the girl realized that she fell in love with the young man, and soon they had a passionate night in the arms. Samantha then often stayed overnight at Steve's place. His mother, Natalie, on these relationships, looked through her fingers. The woman did not believe that her son was serious about this girl. She was just waiting for Steve to play with the student and then leave her. It had already happened a couple of times in his life. And so just a week before Samantha to go home, then the girl found out that she was pregnant. A few days before this news, Samantha had already agreed with her lover that they would go together to her parents. But it was only worth it for the girl to inform the guy about the pregnancy, as Steve gave a bunch of reasons about the fact that he could not go. And also the young man casually said, "You think about terminating the pregnancy, you need to learn first, and only then think about offspring." At that moment, the girl erupted with indignation and almost hysterically screamed, "Are you saying that you don't need our child with you? Maybe you don't need me either. Let's not have this cheap drama. We're not in the theater. I just let you know that I'm not ready to become a father yet. I need to wait a little longer," Steve said with a little irritation. "You know what it's called. I mean your behavior at the moment. It's hit it and quit it," Samantha said, holding back tears. "Look, baby, let's not fight. You'll go to your family, get some rest, and then you'll think it over. I'm just telling you that you caught me off guard with your pregnancy announcement, and I really don't think I'm ready to be a father at this point in my life," Steve said. "You're going to be a great dad, I know you are. You were just not ready for such a turn of events," said the girl, who thought that she had shocked the young man with the news of her pregnancy, and therefore the lover had such a reaction. And now Samantha was going home by train and thought about how to tell her parents about the pregnancy. She was well aware that at home they would start asking about the father of the future child, and she had nothing to say in response, because she did not know the decision of her boyfriend. The girl was right. As soon as she came to her parents and reported the pregnancy, then the mother, Leslie, immediately asked a few questions. "Who is your boyfriend? How many years? When is the wedding?" "Mom, so many questions that you do not know which one to answer first," quietly said the girl. "And you in order and do not rush. After all, my father and I are worried about you," said the mother. "Mammy, we can talk about this topic alone," Samantha said even more quietly. Leslie frowned after these words. She'd already felt anxious for her daughter. The woman saw how her husband wanted to get indignant, so she asked him affectionately to let him talk to Samantha alone. The girl's father, Jack, did not object to his spouse and silently left the room. As soon as the door closed behind the man, Leslie looked expectantly at her daughter. Samantha saw the look of her mother and did not delay the conversation and quietly said, "Mammy, I do not know how to tell you. In general, I'll tell you how it is. I got pregnant from my favorite man, but he is not ready to become a father. I gave him time to think about it while I'm with you." "What do you mean he's not ready? Jumping and tumbling in bed with you means you're ready. I don't understand you, daughter, frankly. You have to realize that time is running out and your due date is getting longer every day. I'm saying that you can terminate a pregnancy up to a certain point," said the mother. "Mom, I'm gonna have a baby. I'm not going to terminate the pregnancy. I'm just sure that even if Steve refuses the baby now, he will definitely, as soon as the baby is born and he looks at it, he will come back to me," said the girl. "What a fool you are," Leslie said sadly, and after a few minutes of silence continued talking. "It is impossible to tie a man to yourself with a child. You have to decide for yourself. You need a child or not. In any case, do not mean to give birth for someone else. You need to realize that you want this baby and ready to bring him up due to different circumstances yourself. I will give birth. And despite everything, I believe that Steve will be with me," said the girl with pressure. "Well, that's your decision. I'm not the boss of you, and I'm not going to push you around. Under any circumstances, my father and I will be happy to hold a grandson or granddaughter." "Don't worry about Daddy. I'll explain everything to him," said Leslie. "Thanks, Mom. You supported me a lot now, but I didn't expect anything else from you," said the girl with tears in her eyes. The vacations flew by, and Samantha left her parents for her studies. The girl hoped that the guy would think over everything during this time and would be happy about the baby. However, her expectations were not justified. As soon as she met with the young man, Steve immediately said that they would not meet again. The girl looked perplexed at her lover, and he in turn said that he no longer had feelings for Samantha. After this brief conversation, the young woman came to her senses for a long time. She could not believe that the chosen one so simply, without any apparent reason, took her and left her. Samantha experienced the breakup for several days, and then decided that so easily will not let the guy forget about her. The girl dared to talk to Steve's mother. She thought Natalie would influence her son. And soon Samantha was sitting at the guy's house and talking to the landlady. The girl deliberately seized the moment when the chosen one was not at home. Samantha told Natalie about the pregnancy and the fact that Steve had turned away from her. The boyfriend's mother listened to the girl and calmly said, "Why did you come here? I did not put you in bed with my son, and you know very well that after bedding there can be children. As they say, I didn't set you up, and I didn't divorce you. And now, if my son is cold to you, it's not in my power to make him feel for you again. But you must talk to him, because I am carrying his child under my heart and your grandson or granddaughter," said the girl. "Wait, my dear. You can't claim that it is my son's child, so don't attribute to me the kinship with your unborn child. And lastly, I'll ask you not to bother me with your visits anymore. I hope I have made myself clear to you," Natalie said haughtily. "Yes, how dare you say that to me? You've seen that I've spent many nights at your place," Samantha said indignantly. "I don't argue, but who slept with you the other nights?" The landlady smirked and looked at the girl with a contemptuous look and said, "I hope we won't see you again." After these words, Samantha ran out of the apartment. She felt that she was going to cry from helplessness. And only when Samantha returned to the dormitory, she gave herself the freedom of emotion. She hugged her pillow and cried. Several months flew by. During this period of time, Samantha repeatedly tried to talk to Steve, but the man behaved coldly and sometimes hostile towards her. All this the girl silently bore. She hoped in her heart that as soon as the baby is born, the lover will stop treating her like this. Soon Samantha went on maternity leave, took a leave of absence, and went to her parents, as in this city could not stay, because it was necessary to rent an apartment, and the girl had no extra money for this luxury. However, leaving home, she decided that as soon as she gave birth, she would come to Steve again with the baby. The sex of the child at that time, Samantha already knew. It wasn't long before the young woman gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Julia. Samantha gently looked at her daughter, noting that the baby looks very much like her lover. The girl was happy about this circumstance. She thought that Steve would not be able to push away Julia, who looked like two drops like him. Samantha told her mother about it. Leslie, when she heard it, said, "I thought you'd wise up. Julia may look like her biological father, but that has no bearing on the guy wanting to live for his daughter with you. I'm pretty sure Steve and I are gonna be together. And when Julia is 3 months old, we will go to her father's house," the young woman said. Leslie said nothing in response, as she saw that it was useless to dissuade her daughter. The woman decided to let Samantha be convinced by her bitter experience, and maybe then her life would teach her something. When Julia was 3 months old, Samantha packed for Dallas. She sacredly believed that now she would definitely reunite with the man she loved. However, a disappointment awaited the young woman. Steve, as soon as he saw Samantha with a child in his arms on the threshold of the apartment, he immediately declared that it was not his daughter. Samantha was angered by these words and said that she would establish paternity in court. The man, hearing the words of the ex-girlfriend, wryly uttered, "Go ahead and with a song. But only you will make an examination, then I can tell you right away that then I will put all the money and connections to deprive you of motherhood. And believe me, I can do it. Now the choice is yours. You have 2 choices, and I'm going to tell you what they are. First, you leave now and forget the way here, and also forget about my coexistence, as well as I about yours. And the second option is that you may go to court, the consequences of which I have already told you afterwards." "You rascal," exclaimed the girl. "How? Only a few minutes ago said words of love, and now you call me names. You have no right to be misunderstood. And if I am a scoundrel, then why did you tumble in bed with me then?" said the man with a grin. "I hate you," said the young woman. Samantha returned home in a depressed state. She thought about Steve's words about the trial. She wondered to herself whether the guy was bluffing about the deprivation of motherhood or not. As soon as the young woman arrived home, she told her mother about everything. Leslie, after telling her daughter, hugged Samantha and advised her to forget the former chosen one and never remember about him. However, the girl bitterly said, "I am now gnawing with resentment, and I cannot just leave this situation. After all, in fact, Steve accused me of being a slutty girl. I want to prove to him and his mom that I'm not. Specifically, a paternity test. Look, sweet girl, I know you're emotional after this, but you need to find the strength to just forget about that guy. And what if he will carry out his threat, and you will lose your daughter, especially you said that his mother works in the administration? Just think about it. Is it worth it?" "I wouldn't do it if I were you," Leslie said. Samantha thought about her mother's words, and then looked at Julia, who was sleeping peacefully in the children's bed. She thought about what her mother had said for a long time, and finally came to the conclusion that it was not worth stirring up a hornet's nest. Samantha decided that she would simply cross out of the memory of her former lover once and for all. Time moved on, and soon Samantha's sabbatical was coming to an end. The girl's mother offered her daughter to resume her studies. Samantha looked at her mother, perplexed at that moment, and asked, "What about Julia? She is still just a baby, isn't she?" "Don't worry about Julia. I am retired, and I will be able to babysit her, but you will come here more often. Why should you waste your time? You don't have much time left before graduation," said Leslie. "But in principle, your mom is right. I'll finish my studies and get a job. We could use an extra penny now," said the girl. Samantha returned to the institute. She called home almost every day to find out how Julia was doing. The young woman missed her daughter very much and dreamed of graduating as soon as possible in order to return home to her baby. Samantha rarely thought about Steve, and when she arrived in Dallas, she did not even try to make him. Time flew by and Samantha was triumphantly returning home. She had graduated, and now she planned to get a job in the near future. As soon as she arrived home, she hugged her little girl and said, "You are growing by leaps and bounds. How glad I am that now you will be near your mother." After these words, Samantha looked at her mother and saw her red eyes. The girl asked anxiously, "Have you been crying?" "We have Daddy in the hospital. They took him away by ambulance last night. The doctors say he doesn't have long to live," Leslie said through her tears. "What's wrong with him?" "He's never complained about his health," said Samantha. "He's been complaining about chest pains lately, and I've been chasing him to the hospital, but he's as stubborn as you are. Yesterday, he had a seizure, and I called an ambulance. I went with Julia to see him this morning, but they wouldn't let me see my husband," the woman said. "Mom, please don't worry. Everything will be fine. You just have to believe in it. Our daddy is strong, and at Julia's wedding he'll go out. And doctors can be wrong in their diagnosis." Trying not to cry, said the girl, who was stunned by the news of her mother. 2 days later, Leslie's husband died in the hospital. Then the funeral took place. The widow was sobbing in the cemetery, her daughter comforting her as best she could. Samantha realized that now there was nothing she could do to help her mother cope with grief, and she herself felt the loss of her father very much. It had been a month since the funeral, and Leslie had aged a great deal during that period of time. Samantha knew that her mother had given up because of her husband's death. The girl tried to cheer up her mom, but she only smiled sadly in response. Soon Samantha got a job as an accountant in a small firm. The young woman wanted to work on her specialty in the bank, but all the places that there were staffed. The girl did not become upset about this and decided first to gain practice and eventually moved to work in a public institution. And now Julia was 3 years old, and Samantha gave the girl to a kindergarten so that her daughter would have contact with her peers. Leslie was against it. The woman wanted her granddaughter to stay at home for some time. But Samantha stood her ground that Julia needed to socialize with other children. A year passed. As Julia went to kindergarten, the girl was taken from the institution alternately by her grandmother and mother. But lately, Leslie noticed that Samantha more and more often asks to take the child to her. And then the pensioner noticed that her daughter was often late at work. She asked Samantha, "Why have you been coming late from work lately?" "We have a lot of reporting to do, and I have to stay late," she said. "But you didn't have that before," Leslie said, perplexed. "Mom, don't forget that times are changing and life is getting more complicated," Samantha said. 2 weeks after this conversation, Leslie was walking home with her granddaughter from kindergarten when suddenly Julia shouted, "Here comes my mom." The woman looked at the girl, who was pointing with her hand to the sidewalk across the driveway. Indeed, Leslie saw her daughter walking hand in hand with a man. The woman smiled. Now she understood her daughter's delays at work. Only one thing annoyed the mother, that Samantha was hiding her relationship from her. Soon the grandmother and her granddaughter returned home, and Leslie waited impatiently for her daughter. She wanted to talk to her, and as soon as the young woman entered the house, then her mother turned to her with a question. "Is it another emergency at work?" "As always," calmly said the girl. "Daughter, and when did you learn to deceive your mother?" With a smile said the old woman. "What do you mean deceive?" Samantha answered with a question. But then Julia intervened in the conversation between the two women and shouted excitedly, "Mammy and grandmother, and I saw you. You were walking with your uncle on your arm. I wanted to run to you, but my grandmother did not let me. I was still offended at her then." Leslie looked at Samantha with the same smile. The young woman was confused, She understood her mother's question about cheating perfectly now. Samantha told her mother that she would explain everything a little later. Leslie nodded in response and went to heat up dinner to feed everyone. The conversation between the two women didn't happen until after Julia went to bed. Samantha looked at her mom and informed her that she had a man courting her. Leslie was overjoyed at the news and replied to her daughter that it was high time she had a personal life. Samantha looked thoughtfully at her mom and spoke softly. "I don't love that man." "Then why are you going out with him?" The landlady said, perplexed. "He gives me money. Didn't you notice that last month I didn't pay Julia for the children's corner in installments?" Samantha said. "Are you crazy? How can you sell yourself? I already wanted to tell you that you sometimes spoil Julia with your gifts. I raised you without a cubbyhole, and Julia doesn't really need one. I'm begging you, daughter, to end this relationship. You need to respect and appreciate yourself. Believe me that you will meet your happiness in life, but you shouldn't waste on trifles," Leslie said sadly, who was really shocked by her daughter's message. "Mom, the years are flying by and I'm all alone. It seems to me that I will never love anyone," almost crying said the girl. "Ah, well, stop your nonsense. Why do you write yourself in the old women? Everything will work out for you. But stop selling yourself. God forbid Julia finds out about it," said the old woman sternly. "Okay, Mom, let's stop talking about this. I promise that I will not meet with this man, because I myself from this relationship is disgusting. I just hoped that in time I could love a man, but it did not happen," quietly said the young woman. A few days later, Leslie noticed that her daughter really stopped working late. The older woman sighed with relief. She wanted Samantha to be happy, but not like this. Time moved forward, and Julia went to the first grade, and a month before this event, Samantha went to work at the bank. The woman was happy about this event, as she dreamed of working in a government organization. Samantha was happy with everything in her life, except for one thing: she did not have a man. The woman tried to get together with a young man who was 4 years younger than her. However, after a month the guy cheated on her, and Samantha broke off the relationship with him without regret. Once the girl returned home, and she received a call from her daughter's class teacher, Selena, who asked her to come to school tomorrow. Samantha asked the teacher what was the matter, but the interlocutor said that it was not a telephone conversation. Samantha came home and went straight to her daughter. "Julia, did you do something wrong at school?" "No," said the girl sullenly. "You're lying to me. Quickly answer why I am called to school," the woman said sternly. "I don't know," said the daughter with a sullen look. Leslie intervened in the conversation and asked Samantha to calm down. The woman turned to her granddaughter and asked her to go to the nursery. As soon as the child came out, the landlady told Samantha, "You are not behaving properly towards your daughter. Don't you see that on the one hand you spoil her with things and toys, and on the other hand, you don't even try to communicate with your daughter? You are not a child anymore, and you should realize that Julia lacks your attention. She doesn't just need your gifts, she needs companionship." "Mom, why don't you tell me how to raise my own daughter? I'll figure it out myself," said the young woman irritably. "Well, I will not, but then do not cry if your daughter closes. That's when I will not be able to help you with advice, because you will lose time. Do as you see fit," Leslie said sadly. The woman saw that her daughter had just gone to work and was buying off Julia with gifts so that she wouldn't have to spend time with her. The next morning, Samantha called to work and said that she would be late, and then went to school with her daughter. The woman and child walked into Julia's classroom, where they were greeted by the classroom teacher. Selena escorted the children out of the classroom and asked the parent if the girl had told her about yesterday's incident. Samantha shook her head negatively, and then the teacher said, "Yesterday your daughter at recess cut with scissors the textbooks and notebooks of one of the students. The girl's name is Mallory. You realize that's nonsense, don't you? And what makes you think Julia did it?" Samantha said. When Julia did it, a student came into the classroom and witnessed the incident. You need to have a serious talk with your daughter, first of all. And you need to apologize to the parents of the girl who was hurt and to the child herself. That's two. And lastly, you are well aware that your girl has committed a misdemeanor. She has damaged someone else's property, and you need to compensate for it, said the teacher. I heard you, but it is worth to understand. I am interested in the reason for this act. Maybe my daughter decided to take revenge on Mallory. Julia couldn't just do it without a reason, and I'd like to hear it from you, Samantha said discreetly. I think you should ask your daughter. You're her mother, not me, Selena said. Don't poke me in my parental duties. This incident didn't happen at my house. It happened in your classroom when you were in charge of the children. And the first thing you should have done was to ask Julia the reason for it. And I understand that you didn't do it, she said reproachfully. Samantha, I didn't call you here to exchange barbs. I told you about your daughter's behavior. And one more thing, I talked to both girls after that, but they don't say anything. I have nothing more to say to you, Selena said. Samantha left the school in a bad mood. She wished that the working day would be over as soon as possible. She wanted to talk to her daughter. Samantha couldn't understand how Julia could do that. She was a kind and sympathetic girl. The workday was over, and the woman walked home with a quick step. In her mind, Samantha went over the options of how she would start a conversation with her daughter. When she got home, she still hadn't figured out where to start the conversation. As soon as Samantha entered the apartment, she asked her mother what Julia had told her after school today. Leslie replied that her granddaughter refused to engage in dialogue at all. Samantha went into her daughter's room and saw that the girl was drawing at the table. The mother turned to the girl. I didn't have time to talk to you at school today, so we'll do it right now. Let me know why you cut your classmates' textbooks and notebooks. Julia continued to draw without reacting to her mother's words. Such ignorant behavior infuriated the woman, and she'd already in raised tones spoke out. I'm not talking to the wall, I'm talking to you. If you have committed a disgusting act, you should be responsible for it. So be reasonable and answer my question. I don't like that Mallory. She's always bragging about how her parents buy her everything. I got tired of listening to her, so I shut her up. And since her parents are so rich, they'll buy her books and notebooks again, the daughter said calmly. Wait, but it's just monstrous to ruin other people's things for such a stupid reason. Can you imagine that someone else doesn't like you either, and they will do the same to you? You embarrassed me in front of that girl's parents. Listen to me. I have coworkers at work that I don't like, but I don't break their laptops or anything. Let's agree so before you want to create a deed, then initially you will turn either to me or to the grandmother and will not make decisions on your own. I'll have to spend some money on your classmate because of your stupid act. And you also promise me right now that tomorrow you will apologize to this Mallory, said the mother of the daughter. Okay, the girl mumbled. Samantha went out into the hall, where she saw her mother, who had perfectly heard the whole short conversation between her daughter and Julia. Leslie came up to Samantha and said that she was good, as she found the right words for the child. The girl thanked her mother for the praise, and then wondered if maybe she was actually not giving her child enough time. From that day on, the woman decided that now she would try to talk to her daughter as often as possible. Several years passed. During this period, Samantha had another affair with a man, which lasted no more than 6 months. At first, the woman was happy with this man, but then, as it turned out, the man was a gambler. Initially, the girl did not pay attention that the chosen one was spending money in the casino, but when he began to demand finances from her, she immediately pointed the man at the door. When Julia was in the 7th grade, then Leslie fell ill. The elderly woman was admitted to the hospital. As it turned out, she had a heart attack. Samantha at that point in time was torn between work, going to the hospital, and household duties. The woman felt that at this rate, she would soon be exhausted, both mentally and physically. Samantha turned to her daughter for help. Julia, you're not a little kid anymore. You can see that Mom is exhausted. I have to gallop home from work to prepare food for my grandmother and bring it to her. The food at the hospital is disgusting, and then I have to wash the dishes and eat and other duties. Let you help me with the household chores. You should have done it long ago, but your grandmother always felt sorry for you. Mom, but you are so interesting, and when will I go out then? Julia asked unhappily. You have to know how to allocate your time. In general, your duties include washing the dishes, walking the dog. And in general, the dog was taken at your whim, and grandmother or I had to take care of it. From now on, we're changing our life a little bit. You won't laze around anymore, said Samantha. Why don't you ask my opinion? Don't I have a say? Grandmother, if she were here now, would definitely take my side, said Julia. So stop bickering with your mother. You will do as I say, said the woman. The next day, Samantha came home from work to find her daughter gone and a dirty plate in the sink. The woman frowned, because when she left for work, she never left dirty dishes behind. That meant that Julia had come from school, eaten, and hadn't cleaned her plate after her. Samantha entered her daughter's room and saw that the child was also ignoring the fact that she had asked to put things in the closet from the morning. Samantha followed into the kitchen to boil her mother some dumplings to take to the hospital. The woman mentally scolded her daughter as she cooked and thought of ways to punish her. Soon Samantha was already sitting in Leslie's room and talking to her. The older woman was asking about her granddaughter and how she was doing. Samantha wanted to tell her mother that Julia was completely out of control, but restrained herself because her mother should not be worried. In the evening of the same day, Samantha sat on the couch and waited for her daughter to return. As soon as Julia entered, the woman said in an icy tone, I understand that I am not your boss and you completely ignore my words. Well, we'll do the same to you. I won't give you money for small expenses. If you want to eat at school, bring your own food, which you'll make yourself. Mom, I just forgot what I have to do. No more packed lunches. That's so last century. Tomorrow, I'll do everything. You'll see. Just give me the money, said Julia capriciously. All right, let it be your way. Tomorrow, I'll give you the money, said her mother. For the first 3 days after this conversation, Julia fulfilled her mother's duties, but then she started to ignore her mother's tasks again. Samantha did not bother her daughter anymore, but simply left Julia no money. And on the same day, the daughter resentfully told her mother that she would tell her grandmother everything. Samantha wanted to yell at the child, but stopped herself in time and said, Just dare to do it. The grandmother must not worry at all. You have to realize that any anxiety could give her another heart attack. So if you want to get money, you must do your chores like a diligent child. Julia sullenly remained silent in response and only asked her mother when her grandmother would be discharged. Samantha replied that it would be in a couple of days. As soon as Julia heard this, she breathed a sigh of relief. The girl decided that it would be okay to wait a few days, and then Grandma would take care of the household chores. Soon Leslie was discharged, and as before, the old woman took on her shoulders the housework. This fact did not escape Samantha's gaze, and she decided to talk to her mother. Mom, you indulge Julia in everything, and you can't do that. She doesn't do anything around the house. Julia is not a 5-year-old child anymore, and she should help us too. I'm asking you not to do her chores for her. She'll have to do housework when she gets married, and now let her rest for the time being. Especially I have plenty of time. At least I will be useful in something, said the old woman. You're wrong, Mom. Yes, realize that Julia will grow up selfish. You yourself once scolded me for spoiling her with gifts and things, and now you do the same thing. When I don't give her money for unfulfilled work, you give her money secretly from me. Samantha said tiredly. Don't be angry. I will do as you say, said the old woman with a smile. Leslie died when Julia was in 11th grade. Samantha and her daughter were taking the loss of their loved one hard. The elderly woman was buried next to the grave of her late spouse. Samantha, during the burial, said to herself, "Here you are, Mom, and reunited with your loved one in heaven." After Leslie's passing, Samantha went through a difficult time in her life. Her late mother had previously helped her with finances from her pension, but now there was no place to wait for help, and Julia started asking for more and more money for daily expenses. Samantha tried to explain to the girl that she needed to reduce her requests a little. A month after the funeral, she received a phone call from Victoria, her class teacher, who immediately said, "I'd like to see you tomorrow at school. I'd like to see you at school tomorrow. It's about your daughter's behavior." "What's wrong?" Samantha asked excitedly. "It's a long story and not over the phone. If you have some free time at the moment, you can come to the school. I'll be here later today anyway," said the teacher. "I'll be at your place within the hour," Samantha said. The woman excused herself from work, then called a cab and drove to the school. On the way, she tried to call her daughter, but her phone was disconnected. Samantha felt that she was called for a reason and was very worried that her daughter had made a serious mess in the educational institution. And the woman was not mistaken in her speculations, as the teacher immediately said to Samantha when she met her, "I know that you've had a grief recently. I'm sorry for your loss. But I have some more unpleasant news to tell you. It's that today your daughter went through students' pockets in the locker room. The girl was caught red-handed by our cleaning lady. But this is not an isolated incident. The same incident happened a couple weeks ago. Julia was seen doing it by our counselor. We talked to your girl, and she promised it wouldn't happen again. I didn't tell you at that time, because I realized that you had just recently buried your mother, and it was very hard for you. Plus, I believed Julia that she wouldn't do it again. But, you see, it happened again. Now, I have to report this episode to our principal, but I don't want to do that. I want to help your daughter, but I can't do it without your help. Julia's going through puberty, and she could go down the wrong path, especially with a friend like Sarah." "Wait a minute. Sarah, who's 2 years older than Julia? But she is a decent girl. Her mother is still very sick, and she needed money for the operation," said Samantha quietly, who was stunned by the message of the class teacher. "Yes, I'm talking about this Sarah, only she was expelled from school for systematic truancy. She lives with her mother near me, and I see your daughter around Sarah a lot. But only this girl and her mother are in good health, except for the fact that the woman is a fan of strong drinks," said Victoria, and after a short pause continued, "And now you and I have to decide what to do next. Just understand now, she has already been caught twice by 2 people who work at the school. They will not spread about what happened. But the thing is that the parents of the students have already raised the issue at the meeting about the fact that from the pockets of their children are missing some values. And you realize the school's reputation is being damaged by that. And now imagine that Julia will be caught by a person who will not keep silent. It is not necessary to explain the situation further, so tell me how we will act," said the teacher. "Why do children leave valuables in their pockets?" Samantha asked a question and immediately scolded herself mentally for it. Victoria looked at her parent with a puzzled look when she heard the question. Samantha understood the look of the class teacher without words and immediately said, "I'm sorry, I'm just dizzy from what I've just learned. I can say from my side that I will talk to my daughter today. You see, I'm in a trance at the moment because I don't know what to do. I give my daughter money for small expenses, but within reasonable limits. But her demands are getting bigger and bigger every day. Maybe you can advise me something." Victoria looked at the visitor and said, "Let's do this. I will also talk to your daughter, as you did. And also, if you are advised, try to convince Julia to stop communicating with Sarah. And maybe a psychologist can help you have a professional talk to the girl. Our school psychologist has already talked to Julia, but you see, our employee is very young, only the first year after college, and she has little experience yet. And you need someone with experience. Thank you so much. I don't know how to thank you. Samantha almost cried. The woman went home after school in a gloomy mood. She realized that simple persuasion would not help to set Julia on the right path. Samantha was at a loss as to how to influence her daughter to stop stealing and befriending Sarah, about whom there was a bad rumor. With these sad thoughts, the woman came home, and to her surprise, Julia was already there. The mother looked at her daughter with a testing look. The girl calmly endured the gaze and first asked a question. What has the class already told you fables about me? Stop sarcasm. Let's talk like adults. You're behaving in an unacceptable way. You lied to me and Grandma last year about the money you stole for the operation. Don't tell me that's what happened. I can tell you that I've heard about Sarah's mom. Daughter, realize that you're not only embarrassing yourself, you're embarrassing me. I was ashamed of what you did today. Today, you steal from school children, and tomorrow you'll go robbing stores? How can you not realize that this isn't going to end well? You need to get smart. You're not a stupid girl, so why do I have to spell it out for you? You think I'd enjoy giving you these moralizing lectures? I can answer that I don't like it at all. Now tell me something in return, said the woman, almost crying. I have nothing to say to you. I've already made it clear to you once that I lacked from you, but you didn't hear me, and now I don't want to tell you anything. And don't touch Sarah. She's a great girl and friend, said the girl to her mother. It seems to me that we speak different languages. I have a suggestion for you. Let me sign you up to a psychologist. You go to sessions with a specialist for a while. If you want, we'll go together, Samantha said. I'm not sick enough to go to a psychologist. Can I take it that we've reached the end of our educational conversation? Julia asked quietly. Do you promise me that you won't steal? Said her mother tiredly. Okay, Julia answered. After talking to her daughter, Samantha went to the bathroom, where the door was locked. It was only then that she let the tears flow. She tried to cry quietly so her daughter wouldn't hear. The woman didn't know at the moment if today's conversation had affected Julia's consciousness. And somewhere, with a woman's instinct, Samantha realized that the whole conversation was useless for her daughter. And at the same time, it dawned on her that tears would not help her, and she should talk to Sarah and insist that she stop talking to Julia. Samantha fulfilled her plan. The next day, she got the address of her daughter's friend from Victoria, and soon she met Sarah. The woman looked at the girl with a critical eye, noting that she looked like a vulgar person with bright makeup. Samantha forced herself not to give her daughter's friend a barbed remark about her appearance. Samantha said a friendly hello and introduced herself as Julia's mother. Sarah looked at the visitor with disdain and said, What do you want from me? What do you want from me? I have an unusual favor to ask of you. I'd like you to stop talking to Julia. You see, I don't mind you in general, but your friendship is having a negative effect on my daughter's behavior. I realize I may be saying things that are probably unpleasant for you. I don't know how to convince you that you shouldn't be friends with Julia. Just put yourself in my shoes. I think you two would only want your daughter to be happy. If this is offensive to you, I can suggest another option. Change your lifestyle for the better, said Samantha in a steady voice. Will you give me money to stop being friends with Julia? The girl said defiantly. You see how you talk to a woman who is old enough to be your mother. You address me as you without any preamble, and I address you as you, by the way. And now tell me, what can Julia learn from your intercourse? The woman spoke more sternly. I've had enough of school morals, so go on your way. Let Julia decide who she wants to socialize with. And now goodbye. And with these words, Sarah closed the front door in front of the uninvited guest. Samantha walked out of the entryway in a disgusted mood. The woman, when she went to the girl, thought that the conversation could still work. But now, after a couple of minutes of communication with Sarah, she realized that her daughter had befriended a boorish person who did not care about anyone from a high bell tower. When she got home, Samantha called out to Julia, but she wasn't home. The woman looked into her daughter's room and found it a mess, and she had asked Julia to clean it up from the night before. Samantha felt her anger towards her daughter boiling up inside her, and she only wanted to call Julia when the girl came home. The woman promptly jumped up to her daughter and was about to say everything as Julia shouted angrily, "Who'll ask you to go to Sarah's? I will now disregard your opinion too. How you treat me is how I treat you. How do you talk to your mother?" Samantha, who had never heard such a tone from her daughter before, was stunned. "Oh, what did you want? You think you're such a goody-goody in life. I know everything about you, how you gave birth to me from who knows who, and then slept with a man for money. And with your work, you completely forgot about me, about your life," said the girl angrily, and then quickly skipped to her room, and in a few minutes returned to her mother with a puffy notebook, which she handed to Samantha with the words, "Here you go and enjoy reading." It was Grandma who kept a diary and wrote down everything that happened to her daughter, which is you. It was interesting to read about you. I wasn't going to say anything to you. I kept it all to myself. But you crossed the line when you went to ask Sarah to stop talking to me and even offered her money for it. Samantha was in a daze after her daughter's statement and only said, "I did not offer Sarah money, but asked her to stop the friendship or change her attitude to life." After these words, the woman took the notebook from her daughter's hands and suddenly cried at the same moment. Samantha could not believe that all of what she had been said by her daughter. And Julia looked at her mother and grinned gloatingly and then ran out of the apartment. The girl was glad that she had finally found the strength to tell her mother everything. She was also helped by Sarah, who had said a lot of unpleasant things about her mother after the meeting with Samantha. It had been a couple of hours since Julia had had a fight with her mom and left the house. Samantha, who had already cried during this time, couldn't find a place for herself from worrying about her daughter. She repeatedly called Julia, but she didn't pick up the phone. The woman was out of her mind with worry. She also wondered why her mother kept this diary in which she described the events that concerned her daughter. Samantha only read a few entries in the notebook and realized that Julia was telling the truth because the diary contained this information in Leslie's handwriting. When the clock showed 10 o'clock in the evening, Samantha was in a panic as she didn't know where to look for her daughter. The woman quickly gathered herself and went to Sarah's house, but there she was opened by an elderly lady in an inebriated state who informed her that Sarah was not at home and she would return at an unknown time. Samantha stepped out of the entryway and had just taken a step when she slipped and fell. She tried to get up but felt unable to stand on her foot as she was pierced by a sharp pain in her ankle. The woman cried involuntarily and thought that today was completely filled with sorrowful events. Samantha tried to get up again, but as in the first case, she sank to the ground, which was covered with a crust of ice. A man who was walking his dog came to her aid. The stranger helped the woman to stand up while saying, "How are you so not careful? I have a car. I will now take you to the hospital, although I can assume that you have either a crack or a fracture of the ankle. Are you a doctor to give out diagnoses at a glance?" said the woman, almost crying. "I'm a paramedic, and my name is Byron," said the man, smiling. "I see," said Samantha, and tried to step on her sore foot, and then she cried out in pain. "No, this will not do," said the man and picked up the woman in his arms. Samantha wanted to be indignant at the stranger's prank, but she immediately stopped as she realized that she could not manage without help. Meanwhile, the stranger gently held the victim in his arms and walked towards his car, which was parked not far away. As soon as the man approached the car, he lowered Samantha gently onto the snow-covered ground with the words, "Let's get in the car and I'll take you to the hospital." After that, Byron helped the woman into the car in the front seat and then opened the back door and commanded the dog to jump in. Only then did he get behind the wheel himself. Along the way, Samantha gave her name and told him in a nutshell that she was looking for her daughter. The man drove the woman to the hospital, then made a call and 2 paramedics came out with a stretcher. Before Samantha was to be carried away, Byron asked her a question. "You are likely to be offered hospitalization. Do you intend to stay in the hospital?" "Absolutely not. I still have to find my daughter. You know that," Samantha said. "Then I'll wait for you and we'll solve your problem together." "Don't contradict me," the man said, and signaled the orderlies to carry the woman. A short time later, Byron met Samantha, who had a cast on her leg. The man took Samantha in his arms again without any authorization and carried her to his car. And when he got behind the wheel, he said, "Dictate your daughter's number. I'll call you from my phone. Maybe Julia doesn't pick up when you call on purpose. Let's say she wants you to worry more. And she doesn't know my number, so she might pick up." Samantha dictated the numbers and watched with excitement as the new acquaintance dialed Julia's number. The girl answered immediately, and the man told her that her mom had a cast on and needed help. Julia anxiously asked where the mother was at the moment, and at the same moment Byron handed the phone to Samantha. The woman turned to her daughter excitedly. "Where are you? I've been worried sick about you. I'm at a friend's house. Don't worry about me. I'll come in the morning," said the girl, and immediately disconnected the connection. Samantha wanted to reprimand her daughter, but the conversation was cut off by Julia herself. The woman looked at the phone, clutched in her hand, and suddenly burst into tears. Byron was confused and did not know how to calm the passenger. A few minutes passed before the man spoke. "You need to stop crying. Your tears won't help anything anyway. Let me take you home, and if you don't mind, I'll stay with you." "What about your family? Your relatives will be worried about you," said the woman without stopping crying. "The only family I have is my pug, who sleeps in the back seat. By the way, if you let me in, I will go only with my faithful friend. You know I can't leave him here," said the man. "Thank you for everything, and I agree to accept you too at this late hour," said the woman. Soon the couple was sitting in Samantha's living room. The woman herself, without knowing why, was telling about her life to the man she had met only a couple of hours ago. The man listened attentively to the interlocutor, and with every moment, he realized that he liked the landlady more and more. After a while, Samantha came to her senses and looked at her watch with an alarmed ouch. She apologized to her guest and wondered if she was holding him up. Byron laughed in response and said that he was glad for the delay, because he was a guest of the most beautiful woman in the world. Samantha was embarrassed and said, "Don't make me blush. Don't make me blush like a schoolgirl. You're right about the naughty part. You really are a naughty girl," the man said seriously. "Are we already on a first-name basis?" Samantha said, puzzled. The man was silent in response. He only stared at the woman. The landlady felt naked under this gaze, so she couldn't stand it and asked, "You said that I had done something wrong, and in what way?" "You made the lonely heart of the paramedic beat much stronger," quietly said the man. "I understand you. You want to tell me that I am a woman of easy behavior because I let a strange man in at night. And now you have decided that with beautiful words you can put me in bed for pleasure. Did I understand everything correctly?" Hostile note. "So understand correctly that I am not your enemy, but your friend. Your mum's being counseled at the moment. And who told you that I'm going to communicate with you?" The girl said pompously. "And you have no other way out, because I'm taking over your mother's patronage and at the same time, and you. Someone has to cover your night out," Byron said with a smile. Julia grinned and went to her room. Samantha wanted to yell at the guest, but the man gestured for the landlady to be quiet, and then the guest muttered that it was useless to scold her daughter now. The woman looked perplexed at the interlocutor, and he in turn said that now it was necessary to communicate more with Julia. Samantha flared up after these words and asked the man to leave the apartment. Byron, with a smile, took the replica of the woman he liked and said that he would visit Samantha in the near future. As soon as the guest left, Samantha called her daughter and lectured her for a long time on raised tones, and the girl looked indifferently at her mother. The woman felt that everything she said for Julia was parallel. At last, Samantha said, "If there is one remark from the school, then believe me, I will find a way to punish you. I can also tell you that there are special boarding schools for troubled teenagers, so I could overcome myself and send you there, so that they can teach you some sense." "I know what you mean. There is a fiancé, then from the daughter must get rid of," mockingly said Julia, and closing the door to her room through her mother. "Good idea, go ahead." Samantha clenched her fists powerlessly. She wanted to spank her daughter on her soft spot, but she realized that this method of upbringing was no longer suitable. The woman lay down. She tried to calm down, but it was not possible. Samantha fell asleep only in the morning. When the woman woke up, her daughter was already gone. Samantha looked at the clock. At this moment, Julia should have a break, and she decided to call Julia, but the girl dropped the call. And just a few minutes later, Samantha received a call from the class teacher informing her that Julia had stolen a cell phone from a junior high school student, and there were witnesses to the act. Samantha was stunned by this news. She told the teacher that she couldn't come to school. Victoria pronounced that she knew about the broken ankle. The teacher also said that the theft case would not be considered at the pedagogical council, and Julia would be registered at the children's police station. After the conversation, Samantha sat down and cried. She did not know how to get in touch with her daughter. The woman was lost in guessing in what period of time she had missed the upbringing of her child, and Samantha called an anonymous center of psychological help out of desperation. "Who are you to tell me what I do or don't do? I see you for the second time in my life to listen to your reproaches. So we'll see each other every day from now on. What's the problem?" "I'm moving here to live with you," said the guest with a smile. "What kind of impudent statement is that?" the woman said in confusion. "We're adults. If you didn't like me, you would have told me to get out right away, but you didn't. But if you want me to hit on you for a couple of weeks, I'll do it. But realize how much precious time we'll lose," the man said. "You're really crazy. Get out and never come to me again," exclaimed the woman, and at the same moment was silent as Byron embraced her and kissed her passionately on the lips. And then the man left, leaving a note with his phone number on the nightstand. The woman pressed her palm to her lips after Byron left and smiled involuntarily. At that moment, she wished the man had left, as she wished the man had continued to kiss her. Samantha picked up the piece of paper and twirled it thoughtfully before her eyes. 2 weeks had passed since Byron had left, and the man had not made himself known. The woman thought about him often and found herself wishing she could see him every day. The relationship with her daughter was strained. Julia tried not to talk to her mother too much. Soon Samantha's cast was removed, and she was on her way home from the hospital when the phone rang. It was the class teacher calling. Samantha immediately tensed up internally, and not in vain, as the teacher informed her that Julia had fought with a classmate and broken her index finger. The parents of the victim are going to file a petition in court against Julia's mother, who negligently brings up her daughter, since the child behaves like that. Victoria advised Samantha to go to the girl and try to settle the conflict. Samantha thanked the educator for the call and disconnected the connection. The woman took a cab and went to the victim's house. Samantha immediately asked for herself and her daughter to apologize to the girl and her parents. And then the woman said, "I realize that my daughter has committed a terrible act and it is impossible to turn a blind eye to it. But I have a compelling request to you not to file an application to the court. Let me give you some money in the form of compensation for moral harm. Understand me correctly. I do not want publicity in this case." The parents of the victim named the amount they would like to have and asked Samantha to talk strictly with her daughter, as they will not tolerate such behavior for the second time. The woman tearfully promised that she would talk to Julia today, after which she once again thanked the owners of the apartment for everything. Samantha returned home in a depressed state. Her way passed through the apartment building where a friend of her daughter lived. The woman looked gloomily at the entrance where Sarah lived. She blamed her daughter's friend for all her troubles. Samantha mentally imagined how she would like to reprimand the girl now. The woman was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't immediately hear someone calling her name. Samantha turned to the side and saw Byron, who was walking with a dog. The man approached her and said, "I see you are in a foul mood again. I wish I could admire your smile and never see you cry. You know, and I'm so glad to see you, but you disappeared and never gave any news about yourself," said the woman sadly. "You had my phone number, and you could have called me at any time of the day or night, and I would have come right away. I have a proposition for you. Let's go to my place. I'm having a little party tonight, and I don't want to celebrate alone," Byron said. "What kind of celebration?" the woman asked quietly. "It was to celebrate a paramedic's length of service. I've been a paramedic for 20 years, he said with a smile. "Wow. Such an event is not a sin to celebrate. But I don't have a present," Samantha said. "For me, the gift is you. Now let's go to my place," said the man cheerfully. And now the couple sat in Byron's one-room apartment. The man put in front of the guest a vase with sweets, as well as a small purchased cake and poured tea. They were sitting and talking peacefully when Samantha suddenly asked, "I don't understand one thing. Why do you live without a soulmate? After all, you are handsome, not old, tactful in communication. I was married and have a grown-up son who went abroad to live. With my wife divorced more than 8 years ago. At one time I loved her very much, and she cheated on me. Then I took offense at the whole world and gave myself completely to work, excluding from his life of the fair sex, but up to a certain point. And you know what it was?" said the landlord quietly. "I don't know," said the woman, who guessed perfectly well what her interlocutor was talking about. And at the same moment, Byron stood up, approached the guest, and then bent down and said in a hoarse voice, "Then I'll remind you now," and with these words he kissed Samantha. And then there were hot kisses, passionate embraces. It was not until some time later that they broke away from each other. Samantha lay on her lover's shoulder and stroked the man's cheek with the palm of her hand. Byron looked at the woman and spoke, "I feel very good with you. Even then, when you fell unsuccessfully lifted in my arms, I realized that I want to carry you like this all the time. And you offer it to me, and you will know my answer," the woman said with a smile. "Let's never be apart again," Byron said. "I'd love to, but you know how much trouble I'm having with my daughter. Julia would blame me if we got back together. I paid a lot of money today to get this phone thing out of the way. Sometimes I think she does it on purpose to make me mad," she said sadly. "I'll take care of Julia, but you have to change a lot of things about her too. You need to realize that Julia is a person and not your property. Now, let's get ready and go to your place. I'll go to work from your apartment tomorrow morning. And Julia has to have a cake for my birthday. By the way, how does your daughter feel about dogs?" the man said. "You'll have to ask her about that, because we had a dog for Julia, but she didn't want to take care of it. So I gave the dog to good hands later," Samantha said and added, "I'm so scared. I mean about bringing a man to our house for the night." "You're talking nonsense. You're not bringing a man to sleep over. You're bringing a man you love to live with you. That's the right way to put it," Byron said softly and kissed his beloved. Soon the couple was sitting in Samantha's apartment talking. The woman was visibly nervous and glanced at her watch. Byron saw all this and asked his beloved not to worry. Samantha nodded nervously in response, but continued to worry. And then the front door opened and Julia, who didn't know that her mother wasn't alone in the apartment, came in. The girl from the threshold shouted, "Mom, I tell you at once that you do not read me lectures about stealing, or else otherwise I will leave the house. The sweet child came home, and we are waiting for you to drink tea and celebrate my holiday. And by the way, I'm not going to lecture you. I'm just going to have a heart-to-heart talk with you," Byron said. The girl entered the hall and looked at the man perplexed, and then she looked at her mother, who was sitting with her eyes down to the floor. Julia then turned to the man. Let's have a conversation, but I will also tell you that if I don't like it, I will leave here immediately. Byron smiled and said that he wanted to talk to the girl alone. Julia at first wanted to resent the suggestion, but then changed her mind and waved her hand toward her room. The couple secluded themselves. The man, as soon as they were alone, spoke. Let's do the following. First, I will live from this day with you. Second, I and your mom will soon become husband and wife, and this means that I love your mom and will not give her an offense. Thirdly, from this day forward, you will stop stealing and generally behaving inappropriately. I, for my part, pledge to treat you with understanding and respect, and in doing so, I'd also want to be your friend. How's that sound? Isn't that a lot to take on, Uncle? When you pay, then we'll talk. Julia said with a sneer and then added, you have to pay for pleasure. And if you want to sleep with my mom, you have to shut your stepdaughter's mouth with bills. You sound like a local thug, but I can live with that. We'll agree on finances, but you stick to my 3 points, how to behave. Said the man and just wanted to leave as he turned and added, and you should not call me uncle. It sounds vulgar from your lips, but Byron and address me on you will be just right. By the way, I came here with my dog. His name is Walter. He loves to be petted. Byron left Julia's room and walked towards Samantha, who was staring at him questioningly. The man stroked the woman's hand and pronounced that Julia knew about everything and that she would change from this day forward. Samantha looked at her lover incredulously, and he only winked at her in response. The next day, Byron left for work early in the morning and kissed his lover before leaving. Only behind the man closed the front door as Julia ran up to her mother and asked when she had time to seduce this paramedic. Samantha cringed at her daughter's words like a toothache and asked Julia to choose her words. Julia only laughed mockingly in response. A couple of days later, Samantha and her lover filed an application in the registry office. The woman was happy because next to her was her favorite person and her daughter became more malleable. However, the ideal in the family did not last long. Already after Byron and Samantha signed, then Julia declared herself. The girl began to demand more and more money from her mother's husband. The man gave at first within reasonable limits, but then her appetite for finances increased, and he told her that he would receive pocket money every day, but in smaller amounts. Julia's reaction to this announcement was lightning fast. She didn't come home for the night. Samantha roared all night, and when her daughter showed up in the morning, gave her a huge scandal. She slapped her in the face. Julia only laughed in response, and then suggested that the mother to talk about this topic with her husband. A few years later, Julia finished 11 grades. During this time, Samantha and her husband repeatedly blushed for the girl's actions at pedagogical councils, on the Commission on Juvenile Affairs, as well as in front of the parents of the affected students. Samantha repeatedly tried to talk to her daughter to educate her. Often the woman did not hold back and went to shouting during explanatory conversations. Byron at such times tried to pacify his beloved and not to shout at Julia. The man wanted the girl to express why she behaves like this, but the stepdaughter refused to contact him in a friendly way. And so the day before her 18th birthday, the girl appealed to her stepfather with a request that he give a round sum of money. The man asked what exactly, and Julia voiced the figure. Byron, having heard with surprise, whistled and said, "Your appetite, dear lady, has grown by leaps and bounds. May I ask what kind of business you need so much money for? After all, on this amount you can live at least a couple of months without needing anything. Do you care? It's my birthday, and I want to celebrate it in a big way after all. Not every day you celebrate such a date," said the girl. "But I don't have that much money. I could offer you only a third. I understand that it's your birthday, but you have to balance your income and expenses, the man said. Julia snorted in response and waited for her mother to come home from work to talk about it. As soon as Amanda came and recognized her daughter's request, she immediately gave a negative answer, as she did not have such finances. A scandal broke out between the mother and Julia first called her mother a foul word and slapped her on the cheek, and then locked herself in her room. Amanda, who had not expected this turn of events, sat in the hall crying. In such a state, the woman was caught by her husband, who woke out during the conversation on business. He hugged his beloved and asked about the reason for the tears. Byron frowned, because Julia had never allowed herself to raise a hand on her mother before. He went to his stepdaughter's room and knocked on the door. The girl replied that she had no desire to talk to any of the household. The next day, Amanda got up and saw that her daughter was no longer at home. The woman was surprised at this, as Julia had been sleeping practically until lunchtime lately after school, and here she was gone. Amanda walked into the room and noted, as always, that her daughter had left a mess in the room, and then noticed a white sheet taped to the dresser. She walked over and read the message, which was written in Julia's hand. "You will regret everything." Amanda shuddered to think what else Julia might do. The woman went into the living room and suddenly noticed that one door of the sideboard was not closed. Puzzled, she walked over and opened the door wider and immediately noticed that the jewelry box was ajar. Amanda took the box in her hands and found that the black gold cross that Byron had given her was missing. It was a piece of jewelry he had inherited from his grandmother. She then asked him why he had not given the cross to his first wife, and he jokingly replied that he was saving the jewelry for her, and now the jewel was gone. The woman sank powerlessly to the floor. She realized that her daughter had taken the cross in revenge for her not giving her the money. Amanda did not know how to tell her husband about it now when he woke up, but it was necessary to speak. The woman tried to call her daughter, but the caller was out of range. Amanda dialed and dialed Julia, and soon Byron woke up and saw his wife sitting on the floor. He walked over to his wife and said affectionately, "Why are you sitting here all alone? I don't know how to tell you about it. My daughter stole from us." And with these words, the woman sobbed. "What are you talking about?" said the head of the family in bewilderment. "Julia has taken the cross and is not answering the phone," Amanda said through her tears. "Oh, that's what it is. Stop crying. Let's hope that the money from selling the jewelry will be enough for her and she won't do something stupid. You know very well that you would have inherited this cross to your daughter in the future anyway. Just consider that you did it in advance," the man said to his wife and hugged her tenderly. Byron understood that now his wife felt guilty about her daughter's deed, and he didn't want her to feel guilty for something she hadn't done. Julia hadn't been home for 2 days. Amanda was tormented by the thought that something bad had happened to her daughter. She tried not to let her husband see her tears, but Byron saw the red eyes of his wife and understood the reason for it. He supported her as best he could, trying to cheer her up. And on the 3rd day, Amanda received a call from the police informing her that her daughter had been arrested for robbing a store and was detained on a hot trail. The woman was at home at that moment and only heard the news and sat down quietly on a chair. She couldn't believe what the stranger had just said on the phone. Amanda would have been happy to cry, but there were no tears at all. She felt a kind of numbness. Soon her husband came home from work and saw the detached look in her eyes. Byron asked the woman worriedly, "What happened, my love?" Amanda looked at her husband and spoke quietly. "The police called and said that Julia robbed the store. What will happen now? Will she go to jail? How could something like that happen? What should we do?" The man looked at his wife dumbfounded. He had not expected such news and was at a loss. It took a few minutes before Byron could gather his thoughts and tell his wife to calm down. The head of the family thought about what they could do in this situation. But looking at the time, he realized that at the beginning of the 9th night, they would not be able to solve any problems. He hugged his wife and quietly said, "Let me give you a sedative now, and you go to bed. Understand, my dear, that now we are not able to do anything. It is necessary to wait for the morning and only then to act. But to be honest, I do not know what to do. I promise we'll do something anyway." The next day, Byron and his wife went to the police, where they learned all the details from the investigator. Samantha asked the man in uniform to let her daughter go free, and as if in a trance, repeated that she was ready to give a lot of money for it. The investigator saw that the woman was in a state of affect and advised Byron to take his wife home. A couple days passed, and Samantha learned that she and her spouse could do nothing to help Julia. The investigator was only able to authorize a visit with Julia. Samantha cried tears and told her daughter, "What have you done? You've ruined your life." "It's too late for tears, Mom. You couldn't get your only child out of jail, then disappear from my life forever. I don't want to see you," she said in a mocking tone. After these words of her daughter, Samantha silently stood up and then looked sadly at Julia and said, "As you say, my dear, I will not trouble you anymore." So there was a trial, which was attended only by Byron, and Samantha flatly refused to be present at the sentencing. The girl was given 4 years in prison. Julia's mother learned about this from her husband. The woman silently listened to her husband and did not say anything in response. Byron at that time thought that the wife was in shock, so such an indifferent reaction to the sentence. However, time passed and Samantha completely refused to talk to her husband about her daughter. Byron tried to dissolve his beloved, saying that it is necessary July to write to the prison and support the girl behind the barbed wire. But in response, the husband heard only one thing: "Stop reminding me of her. I'm honoring her request. Let's please don't talk about this topic, as I don't want to. Just don't rub it in my face." It's been a year since Julia was sent to prison. Samantha had steadfastly refused to talk about her daughter all that time, and Byron had stopped bothering his wife with reminders of Julia. He did not want to cause her mental anguish, as he saw that as soon as they started talking about Julia, Samantha became nervous and he had to give her a sedative. However, Samantha did not understand in the past year why her husband had 2 business trips for professional development, and she suspected her husband of adultery. And it also became a reason that Byron started taking extra shifts at night. Samantha couldn't take it anymore and asked him point blank, "Did you get another woman on the side? What makes you say that? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? Can you even explain why you made such conclusions?" Bewildered husband asked, "I'm not a stupid woman, and your night duty, which you are constantly taking, I have certain thoughts. You do not find it as significant evidence in your cheating," said the spouse. "Are you crazy? Honey, I don't need anyone but you. Why are you talking nonsense?" "Yes, damn, I'm trying to earn money on purpose, so that we with you to go to the sea to relax, and you're making up such a thing here," said the husband. The woman, after these words, sighed with relief. She was actually afraid that her lover has taken a mistress on the side. And when the man said that he was saving money for a trip to the sea, she was relieved. Several years passed, and Samantha asked her spouse about the fact that he still takes extra shifts, and they still have not gone anywhere on vacation. The man hugged his chosen one in response and pronounced that the trip was cancelled due to his illness. The wife only heard about the indisposition of the chosen one, as immediately became alarmed. She immediately asked a bunch of questions to her husband. However, the man stopped the eloquent flow of the chosen one and said, "Why are you so worried? A simple ailment, and do not need to now so immediately think about the bad. Give me time and everything will be normal. I just need to lie down in the hospital and improve my health. Wait, are you suspecting me of adultery again? Oh, you naughty girl. Tell me the truth about yourself. I beg you," with tears in her eyes said the woman, who was afraid of losing her loved one, and in response she heard Byron's words, "My darling, I'm all right. You do not worry, but I have a serious conversation with you. I know you don't want to talk about your daughter because you're in a shell, but it's time to crawl out of it. Realize that Julia is your own child and has made mistakes in her life, and more than one, but she needs to be given a chance. You have to meet her." "That's out of the question. Do you want us to have a big fight?" "I don't feel like it," Samantha said dryly. "Well, my dear, we will not talk about it today," Byron said humbly. He hoped to have a conversation with his wife about her daughter. The man was disappointed that his wife was once again taking the conversation on the subject in stride. He knew he didn't have much time left to reconcile mother and daughter. A little over 2 months after that conversation, Byron passed away from brain cancer. This was a big blow to Samantha, as her husband was well aware of his illness and had kept it from her. She learned about it from her husband's colleagues, who reported that her husband asked her not to inform her about the disease in any case, as he was worried about her condition. This circumstance most of all rubbed her soul, because the loved one knew that he was dying and worried about her. When the funeral took place, Samantha sobbed in despair. The woman could not believe that now she was left alone, without her loved one. She watched the coffin being lowered into the pit, and wanted only one thing at that moment, to be near her husband. After the funeral, a couple of days passed and the woman, having visited the grave, came home, as suddenly felt that there was someone in the apartment. She herself did not know where this premonition came from. She went through the rooms, but there were no traces. Samantha scolded herself mentally for being suspicious. However, the feeling that someone had been in the apartment did not let go, and the woman decided to check the spare keys to the apartment, which she and her husband kept in the chest of drawers. And then Samantha noticed that they were missing. The woman was well aware that the deceased husband, if he had taken a duplicate, would have informed her about it. Samantha was terrified, because the keys couldn't just disappear. So someone had stolen them. The woman immediately wondered who had done it and why, because she and her late husband, if they had a small savings, it was on a card. She immediately decided to change the lock in the apartment. And the very next day, when she got to work, she took the day off. The woman hurried home, as she had already contacted a specialist who was to change her lock that day. When Samantha approached the door of her apartment, she noticed that the doormat was lying crooked. This alerted the woman, and she carefully opened the front door. Samantha entered the apartment and suddenly froze with horror as she saw her own daughter rummaging through her things. All the woman could manage to say was, "Julia," and with these words she lost consciousness. Samantha woke up some time later. Her daughter was sitting beside her, her eyes reddened with tears. Julia quietly said, "I'm sorry, Mom, but we need to talk." "Are you able to do that now, or should I call for an ambulance?" "Date, how did you get here?" Barely audible, Mother said. "I have a lot to tell you, but please let me speak," Julia said. "I'm listening to you," Samantha said, still not understanding what was happening. "Mom, I'm very sorry to you, but it's not about that now. Your husband was a wonderful man, and I'm ashamed that I treated you and him like a pig after I sent you away. But you remember that Uncle Byron didn't leave me. He came to see me once every 6 months, and he told you that he was going on a refresher course, and he took extra shifts on duty, and again to bring me a package to the prison. Your spouse, I know, tried to reconcile us, because he repeatedly offered me to write to you, but I had a grudge against you since childhood, and I told him about it. I told him that you put your job ahead of me, and that you did. Don't argue with me now, because I'll explain it to you later. Eventually, I got out of detention and Byron came to my rescue. He offered to let me live in his apartment. I had no other choice, as I didn't want to go to you. And soon I met a man I fell in love with and got pregnant and then gave birth. That's when I found out about Byron's illness, and he strictly ordered me not to tell you. Mom, your husband loved you very much. I envied you, to tell you the truth. That's when I realized when I gave birth to my son and named him after Byron. I realized what a mother is and how I hurt you unfairly all that time. Wait, Julia, how did you get here? How did you get the keys? What are you looking for here? Samantha said incomprehensibly to her daughter. Julia looked at her mother with excitement and wanted to continue talking, but she couldn't because she cried and knelt down in front of her mother with the words, "You forgive me. I am so guilty before you. I don't know how to apologize to you. It's just that Byron gave me the keys and told me before he passed away that in one of your books he left me and my son money, and he also took a promise from me that I would make peace with you. But I was afraid, so I came in here sneaking away from you, but you came in early from work today. I didn't expect this meeting myself as I wasn't prepared for it." Julia paused with these words. Samantha listened to her daughter's last words in silence and then lifted Julia from her knees and cried, as she had just realized that her husband, being seriously ill and noting that he had not long to live, was trying to reconcile her with her daughter. The woman realized that Byron loved her sincerely and she had doubted him for nothing. This realization pressed Samantha the most, and at the same moment, she suddenly realized another thing as well, that she was now a grandmother. The woman only managed to utter, "Where is my grandson? Where is Byron? Mom, do you forgive me?" Julia said with tears in her eyes, "Oh, be quiet, daughter, of course. I've wasted so much time. How old is my grandson?" Samantha said quietly, "He is 2 years old, and he has seen his grandfather Byron," the young woman said. "I want to see him," Samantha said and added, "Did you find the money Byron told you about?" "No, I don't remember your favorite book. Uncle Byron told me it was in your favorite book," Julia said. "I know what edition it's in. Take the book, Singing in the Blackthorns, Byron, and I used to read it together," the woman said. Julia hugged her mother. Only now she realized how much she missed her mother and how much she missed her. The young woman could barely hold back the tears that had come again. Julia wanted at this moment to make her mother understand how remorseful she was for her behavior, and Samantha, sensing her daughter's condition, asked, "Now you know what it is to be a mom. Will you make my mistake? After all, once I gave myself to work simply, forgetting about you, and did not give that proper communication, which I should have given to my own child. Mom, I learned a good lesson, but I'll be honest, it was thanks to Uncle Byron. I'm happy for you and I hope that you and I will never be at odds again." Samantha said and then asked, "Is the father of your child with you?" "He is my boy, just like I am your daughter. He and I broke up before Byron was born, and I'm grateful for that, because he's not much of a father. Now, why don't we go get Byron? He can't stay without his mom for long. I left him with a friend. And now, when he finds out that he has a grandmother, he'll be happy, because he's a loving kid," Julia said. "What are you talking about? Sure, let's go." "Daughter, I love you very much. I'm sorry for everything," said Samantha. "Mom, I'm sorry too. I've made a lot of mistakes. And I'm grateful that you had a wonderful man in your life, whom you loved and he loved you, and who made me understand what love is," said Julia, looking fondly at her mother. "Help!" Selena was tearing her throat out, even though she knew no one would hear her. "I'm here." She was crying. There was snow all around, and most importantly, there were wolves howling somewhere nearby. It was a clear day. Selena was graduating from school. She knew she had her whole life ahead of her now. She walked home in the morning and smiled. Today, they had welcomed the dawn with the whole class. And now, when there was still no one on the streets, she was walking down the sidewalk, joyful in her heart. "Selena, is that you?" She heard her mom's voice. "Why are you awake?" The girl was surprised. "Today, an important guest will come to my father. Here, I'm getting ready." She wiped her hands on the apron, which was tied on her. "Good. Now I'll change and help you." Though she hadn't slept all night, she was still strong. "Why don't you rest?" Mother suggested it. "No, I don't feel like sleeping at all." She went to her room. After that, she and her mother cooked, cut and mixed in the kitchen, and by dinner time so many dishes were ready that it was possible to feed 10 people. "That's it, now we can rest." The mother looked at the prepared treats. "And who should come?" the girl asked the woman. "A friend of her father's. They used to work together." The mother didn't know. Well, this information did not give the girl anything. She went to her room and sat in front of the mirror. She liked to sit there, looking at her reflection, sometimes dreaming about the future. Now unraveled her hair, brushed it, and wondered what awaited her. "I'm home." She heard her father come in. "When are the guests coming?" his wife asked. Any minute now. Selena knew her father was now looking at his watch. The doorbell rang, and everyone in the hallway fussed. "What's the big deal about this guest that Mom and Dad are acting like this?" the girl thought. She went out to help her mother and was immediately seated at the table. "Hello." A man looked at her. He wasn't young, but he was handsome. "Good afternoon." Selena blushed for some reason. "Meet my daughter. This is Sam, a good friend of mine," her father told her. Selena, she sat down next to her mom. "Wow, and you didn't tell me you were hiding such a beauty here." The man began to speak. "Here, just graduated from high school," boasted the proud parent. "Great," said the guest, and then they continued their meal. Selena saw how masculine he was, speaking correctly and beautifully, sat and looked at Sam. "It's time to say goodbye," said the evening father's friend. He went to the door. While looking at Selena, she looked at him too. "Well, everyone, have a safe trip." Shook his hand. The landlord shook his hand. When the door was closed, his mother went into the room to clear the table. Selena followed her. "Daddy, who is he?" The daughter wanted to ask this at the table, but did not dare. "Military, then worked in the organs, and now appointed head of the zone," said the man while taking plates from his mother and carrying them to the kitchen. "I see," thought the girl. "Why are you interested in him?" Father became curious. "You cannot ask," flared up the girl. "Why are you reacting like that?" The parents looked at each other. Selena did not answer anything else, silently collected everything that was left on the table, took it to the kitchen, and went to her room. In the evening, she thought about Sam. He was just as she had imagined a real man to be. With these thoughts, the girl fell asleep. Selena was going to enter technical school. Becoming an accountant was her dream. Even as a child, she came to the place where her mother worked, sat at the table, and filled out different papers, as if writing something out. "Ready?" her mom asked her that morning when she had to go to the educational institution. Yes, Selena nodded. She walked down the stairs, looking in the mailbox. It had been a month and a half since Sam had been their guest. The first letter from him came practically 2 weeks after that. The girl herself does not know why she looked in the box. She had never done that before. And then she pulled out the envelope. At first she saw the name. She thought it was for her father, but then she noticed her own name. Selena clutched the envelope to her chest. From then on, she checked the mail every day by herself. Incoming, the girl came home. No one doubted it. Her mom smiled. And Selena did not listen to her. She hurried to her room to read what Sam wrote to her. And he sang in his letters how much he liked her and wanted to take her with him. And the girl believed in his love at first sight. "Mom, I need to talk to you." She came home from school. It was December. About what? She was always ready to listen to her daughter. About Sam. Selena looked around the room, though there was no one there, but she was so afraid that her father would find out that she feared it even now. Sam, who Sam was talking about. The woman made a surprised face. Well, a friend of her father's who was visiting, the girl reminded her. "I see, what about him?" Mom couldn't understand what her daughter had to do with a grown man. "We're in love," the daughter blushed. "What do you mean?" The woman clutched her heart. "It's just, he writes to me. He wants to take me back to his place." She wanted to get up to bring the letters, but she saw what was going on with her mom and decided not to. "Selena, what are you doing?" She was fainting. "Don't tell Daddy yet," the girl asked. "Oh, what on earth is going on?" the mother began to wail. The daughter realized that there was no need to continue the conversation. She got up and went into the room. Now she already regretted that she had started this conversation, but it was necessary to prepare at least the mother. Sam had written that he would come on vacation in April and then take her with him. Her father would still find out, but it would be his friend who would tell him. But her mother, she felt sorry for. The rest of the time, Selena was very quiet. She didn't go anywhere to and from school. "Why are you always home?" her father asked her. Just not wanting to go anywhere, he still didn't know anything. Her mother walked around the apartment, sighed, but kept silent. Sometimes her husband thought that she was worried about something, asked, but the woman still just sighed heavily and went to the kitchen. Spring came. Selena waited for the man she had been thinking about for almost a year to arrive. She was afraid of her father, but she knew Sam was persistent and he would get what he wanted. "Mother, set the table. A dear guest is coming." He hung up the phone one weekend afternoon. Selena's heart fluttered. She looked at her mother, who was standing on the doorstep of the kitchen. "What a darling. He wants to steal our daughter from us. The old geezer," the woman muttered to herself under her nose. "What are you saying?" At that moment, her husband came in. "Nothing. I'm glad, I say, that Sam is coming." The wife did not turn to him. And so, like last time, the man arrived. They sat down at the table. Selena dressed up, but was shy to go out. It's not like pouring out your feelings on paper when you're alone in the room. "Selena, how long do you have to wait?" shouted her father. On coming, she entered the hall, a blush flooding her cheeks. "Hello," Sam stood up to greet her. "I'm glad to see you." She stood in front of them, so young with red cheeks. "You?" Her dad looked at her. "Yes, that's the only reason I came," coughed the guest. He was already standing in front of his beloved's parents. "I don't get it." Selena's father stood up too. "Listen, don't get too nervous. I liked your daughter back then. I wrote to her. And then it started," Sam said and looked mainly at the woman who was sitting on the couch. "What do you mean?" The father looked at his daughter and his friend, speechless. "Yes, you got it right. I'm on vacation for 2 weeks. And after that we're leaving." He took the girl's hand. "That's a friend." The man grabbed his head. "Yes, I almost forgot." He took a ring out of his pocket and put it on the girl's finger. Sam had already arranged everything. While he was on vacation, they were promised to be signed. Today, not many people were already talking, so the man got up and invited Selena to go for a walk. The parents had no choice but to agree. "Did you know?" The woman was immediately questioned by her husband as the doors closed. "I'm sorry." She lowered her eyes. "What is it? How could he do such a thing? And I as a fool. Him with open arms." My father almost cried. A week later, Selena told her parents to come to the registry office. Whatever they said, nothing could affect the girl's decision. "What about school?" Mom asked. "Nothing, so I'll finish studying." The girl, what she planned, that's what she did. Sam bought her a beautiful dress, in which she was today. It really suited her blue eyes and dark hair. The bride and groom were different. You could tell he was older and she, the young girl next to him. "You don't have any regrets?" Sam asked her after the check-in. "What do you mean?" She wondered and laughed back. "I can't believe I'm so lucky." He pulled her close to him. When Selena arrived where her husband lived, she was horrified. Constant cold, hardly any civilization. But she kept quiet, didn't say anything about it. "Sam, what am I supposed to do?" she asked. It was summer outside, but the weather bore little resemblance to this time of year. "I don't know, Sue. Knit. The kids will come soon. You'll raise them," he was sure. "Maybe I should get a job somewhere." She was ready to do anything, just to avoid the time at home, which was dragging on very slowly. "Would you like a job at the office?" he asked. "What do you have to do there?" That question came out automatically, and she was all for it. "Counting," he laughed. "Good," she hugged him. "Then it's agreed. You can go out tomorrow, look, learn, and then start working." He was ready to do anything for her. The next day, the girl was already sitting in a small wooden building, where there were two other women besides her. "Here, look, here are the magazines," one of them showed her. Good. Selena began to remember what she had been taught for a year at the technical school. All day long, she looked through some household books and other things. By evening, Selena was sure she could do everything on her own now. She wanted to wait for her husband here, but he was still gone, so she packed up and went home alone. Sam never came home for the night. In the morning, Selena was back at the office. "Did yours come last night?" The woman who had shown her around yesterday asked her. "No, why? Did something happen?" She looked at her new acquaintance. "Yes, they went to the village, had fun there," Natalie told her. "What do you mean?" Selena was still naive about it. She didn't understand how you could live with your wife and go to someone else. "Is this your first time married?" Everyone in the room laughed. Yeah, she didn't realize they were joking. "Selena, you have to keep an eye on the man," Natalie wagged her finger. "But Sam loves me so much," she cried. "Oh, what love these days?" The girls laughed again. The girl sat looking out the window. She couldn't understand anything. In the end, decided not to listen to what she was told and asked her husband directly in the eyes. "Selena, I'm home. He came late at night." "Sam, where were you yesterday?" She didn't wait for anything. It was important for her to know. What kind of questions? A man's not used to being talked to like that. A simple question, "I'm your wife. I was worried, and you just didn't show up." She looked at him point blank. At work, he froze at first, then continued to undress. "That's not what the women say." She chopped off her shoulder. "Listen to them more." He walked past her into the bathtub. In the evening, they ate dinner in silence. It was as if Selena's eyes had been opened. For the first time, she regretted coming here. Why hadn't she wanted to get to know the man? Her mother had warned her. "Are you coming?" Sam asked her this morning. "Drive, I'll walk." She didn't feel like riding next to him in the car. "Suit yourself." He slammed the door. The man realized he was guilty in front of his wife. He didn't know how to make it up to her. In the middle of the day, he came to her office. "Can we talk?" He asked Selena. "Yes." She looked at her coworkers and walked out. "Look, it must be hard for you here. Let's get some assistance," Sam suggested. "Where are you going to get them?" Selena made big eyes. "I've got some people who are trying to get parole. I can get them." He nodded his head at the brick building. "I don't even know." She looked back at the door. "You're handling bales, logs, things like that." He didn't know what else to say. "Okay," Selena agreed then. It was really hard for him and the girls. "Then come with me." He beckoned her to follow him. Sam said something to the soldier. He nodded and then ran off. In a few minutes, several young men were standing in front of Selena and Sam. "Take your pick," her husband pointed at them. Selena had been looking at the ones standing across from them for a while now. They were all kind of the same, but one was very different. His dark eyes, squint, and something else caught her gaze. It was scary and satisfying. She picked out 3, including this stranger she'd been paying attention to. "Well, boys, consider yourselves lucky," the supervisor told them. Now it was their duty to help her with whatever the girl said. "They were doing a great job," Natalie said, as she watched the young men working hard through the window. It was winter outside. It was very cold, so only the 3 of them were working. Selena pretended to watch the men, but she only had eyes for the one. She would give him sugar or cigarettes when she had the chance. He would just stare and smirk, and Selena's eyes were breathtaking. "Thank you," they'd come to sign. "Yeah," he looked up and winked at her. Selena knew these inmates knew her name. Of course they did. Her cum's wife. She didn't, but that was just at first. She looked down the lists. The names of those two didn't interest her much, and this one with the dark eyes was John. Here, he came to work when the first snow began to melt and gave the girl some flowers. They were actually dry sticks, with some feathers on the end, but Selena was pleased. Sam hadn't been around much lately. The girl was offended, so she directed all her attention to John and didn't notice how she fell in love with him. Selena didn't know what he'd done, why he was here, but she didn't care. "Selena, are you crazy?" whispered Natalie when she heard her laughing with her new boyfriend outside the door. "What's the big deal? We were just talking," she replied. Yes, I see. I've been, as you say, for 6 months now." The woman shook her head. "What am I going to do if he's so cute?" Selena couldn't hide her feelings. "Oh girl, be careful. Sam won't forgive you for this." She knew what she was saying. "John will be free soon. He'll be gone and I'll follow him." The girl was sure of herself. Yes, I believe you." Natalie pressed her lips together skeptically. "I don't want to talk about this anymore." Selena looked away from the window, a smile playing on her face. With John, they were getting farther and farther away to talk quietly while they pretended to work. "Will you come with me?" the young man asked her. "Not with you, but behind you," Selena said. "Okay, I'll pass on the information." He took her by the chin with one hand, brought her close to him and looked into her eyes. Selena wanted him to kiss her so badly in those moments, but John didn't. Afterward, they said their goodbyes, not wanting anyone to see them together. He had less than 6 months to stay here. "Sam, can't you see we've become strangers?" Selena asked her husband at home. "What do you want?" He was already regretting taking such a young girl. Yes, to brag in front of friends that there is such a beauty, but she was not good for anything else. Divorce, it was scary, but she said the word. "Okay, but don't regret it." He squinted. "I won't thanks." She didn't look at him. "What, you've been hitting on a convict?" He'd suspected it for years. He'd been told, but he didn't believe it. "It's none of your business." She purposely didn't bring it up while John was here. Now that he's gone, she could have said something. "Yeah, it's not my business anymore." He came very close to her. Inside Selena, everything trembled with fear. She had seen how cruel her husband could be to prisoners. "Don't," she closed her eyes. "Scum." He leaned over her ear and pushed away from her a little. Selena waited to see if there would be a sequel, but Sam got dressed and left the house. She didn't wait for anything at this point, grabbed her bag, which had been ready for a while now, found her papers, waited a bit, and left the apartment. "To the train station," she said to the driver of the car. "Good." He only nodded. Selena sat on the train, looked out the window, and thought that everything in life should be tried. And now she was going to her lover, where no one would stop them from being together. Selena saw him from the window. He was so beautiful standing on the platform, flowers in his hands. "John, how did you know I was coming?" She ran out to meet him. Coming to the trains, waiting, he pressed her against him. Selena was smiling with her mouth full. She was happy. "Now we'll go to my friend's apartment, and then there will be our own," the young man told her. "Don't you have a place to live?" She was surprised, but her eyes had rose-colored glasses again. Love overshadowed everything. "I told you, for now, temporarily," he said in a rough voice. Okay, I get it." She stretched her lips in a smile again. John's friend was out of town at the moment, so for a while, they could stay at his apartment alone. "Are you glad I'm here with you?" She twirled around the room. "And you?" He was looking through his notebook. "Why do you ask? You know I'd do anything for you." She sat down next to him. "I'm glad to." He took her chin in his hand as before, pulling her to him. Selena looked into his eyes and then closed her own. And at that moment, John kissed her. It was their first kiss. "Are we getting married?" She asked him at night as they lay in bed together. "You're so naive." He turned his head toward her and kissed her nose. "What do you mean?" She lifted herself up and lay on his chest. "Of course we'll get married since we have such love." John spoke as if he was laughing at her. The guy went out every morning, came back late at night. Selena wasn't bored. The apartment was such a mess. She wanted to put the place in perfect order. She cooked different dishes, waited for her lover to come home, and he came. The girl thought that's what life is like for two lovers. "Where are you?" He came home. "Hi." She came out into the hallway, wearing a simple but beautiful dress. "What smells so good?" He sniffed. "Your favorite dish." She looked puzzled. After that, they would walk to the kitchen. There the hostess would feed her favorite man. Selena never asked John what he did for a living. She would never have believed he was back on the slippery slope. The man was bringing home money, which meant he was working somewhere. Selena was happy. Sometimes she wanted to call her parents, but then she changed her mind. She wanted them to think she was living with Sam. "So, are you ready?" John asked her one Saturday. "For what?" She didn't understand. To go to the registry office. He pulled out a simple wedding ring. "John, I've been waiting." She went to her room to change. After that, they went to the government office where they were told that they were husband and wife from now on. "I am the happiest man on earth," shouted John that day. He invited some friends. They were sitting at some cottage which was near a lake. "Bro, congratulations." They shook hands with him. Today, he showed his beloved for the first time to those he trusted as himself. "Do you want me to bake a cake tomorrow? Come to us," Selena told them. She wanted everyone to like her. "Of course, if the landlord says yes." The young men laughed. "John," she looked at her husband. "Why me? If they want, let them come." He looked at his friends. From that moment, Selena was once again a happy wife. She knew that her man was the nicest. He would never do anything wrong. And most importantly, she could rely on him. "Have you thought about children?" He asked her in the evening. "Why do you ask?" Of course she wanted to, but she didn't want to say it. Let it go on as it was. "Just in case you don't want it yet," he admitted and lay on his back. "I do." She rested her chin on his chest. "A boy will be born. I'll teach him everything. He'll be like Daddy." He put his hand on her back. "Come on." But not everything, she smiled, and he immediately understood what she meant. "Selena, listen, I will do everything to make you and our future children happy." After these words, the young husband and wife fell asleep. In the morning, as promised, she got up and put the dough. Immediately remembered her mother. It was she who taught her to do this. When she peeled the potatoes, she heard her husband wake up. He went to the bathroom. God, what a divine smell! He went to the kitchen. "Wait, it's not ready yet." She laughed and slapped his hands. "Where are your friends?" "Even if they don't come, I'll eat everything myself." He sat down on a chair and waited. There was a knock on the door, and Oliver stood on the threshold. "Hi, I'm here for the pie," as agreed. He entered the apartment. "Can you feel it?" John raised a finger in the air. "You bet, it smelled like that already in the yard." They went together to the place where Selena was working her magic. "Hello." She said hello to her husband's friend, whom she saw for the second time today. What an officious thing to say, hello. He walked over to her and shook her hand lightly. Good. She was not used to all this. 10 minutes later, they were already sitting at the table eating a delicious fresh pie. "Where are the others?" Selena looked at her friends. "I don't know. They probably couldn't. Both of them had their mouths full of pie." "All right, you'll get more." She cut them each another slice. When John and Oliver went into the room, Selena was clearing the table and washing the dishes. She didn't mean to. It came out by accident. But she overheard the conversation between the two companions. "Did you find out?" John asked Oliver. "No." Oliver had to go. They spoke in a low voice. At first, Selena wanted to just come in. But when she heard the next frog, she didn't dare. "When he comes to visit, We have to vacate the house because we live here illegally, her husband said. Listen, what are you sweating about? Everything will be fine. I'll make a deal, Oliver promised him. Selena went back to the kitchen. There she sat down on a stool, thinking, what if John was back in crime? But as soon as those thoughts crossed her mind, she dismissed them immediately. She didn't want to think bad thoughts. She hadn't heard the beginning of the conversation, and what if it wasn't what she thought it was? Selena, why are you sitting here? Oliver came into the kitchen. What? No, I was just thinking, she was confused. After that, they all went into the hall together. Family life went on. John said that they had to change the apartment. Selena was regretting to part with the nest, which was the first of them with John. Don't feel bad. We'll have our own soon. He pressed Selena against him. The young man did not yet know that his wife was carrying a child under her heart. She didn't tell him. She wanted to come, do everything, set the table, and then tell me, why are you looking so mysteriously and silent? He saw in the evening how tired his wife was, but she still prepared everything. Soon you will have a son. Selena was very calm. How did you know it was a son? He didn't understand. You want an heir, so you will have a son. She put her hands on her stomach. Beloved, he smiled. From that very evening, the young man began to bring home everything that might be needed in the upbringing of a child. What's all this for? Looked Selena surprised. There was already a crib, a stroller, a bunch of stuff, bottles, nipples, and everything else in the apartment. In case something happens to me, he averted his eyes. What could happen? She didn't finish, she stopped talking. Are you sick? He became agitated. Tell me the truth. Where is all this money coming from? Only now she realized that he doesn't work anywhere, but he has money. I don't think you need to know that. He didn't say anything. John, you're doing it again. She wanted to cry, but at that moment he came to her and hugged her. It's going to be okay, he whispered in her ear. He didn't want her to worry. For the rest of the day, Selena passed quietly. She saw that her husband hadn't stopped anything, but she tried not to think about it so she wouldn't worry. Selena, why don't you go to the hospital? Pulled back the curtain and looked down John. What's going on? She wanted to look too. Nothing, just seeing what the weather was like. He turned to her. It was too early to go to the hospital. The due date was almost 3 weeks away. What if it started sooner? He tried to talk her into it. If you tell me the truth, then maybe I'll go. She stood with her arms at her sides. There's no truth. I'm just worried about you. He averted his eyes again. Then it's okay. I'll go to the hospital in 2 weeks. She sat down on the couch. Good. Her husband agreed with her. Selena saw how nervous he was every day, pacing back and forth in the apartment, asking questions. But as always, John just kept quiet. When it was a week before the doctor's due date, Selena went to the hospital herself, as promised. Ouch, 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 ouch. It hurt, but she didn't scream. Ori, it will be easier, the neighbor advised. No, Selena stood bent over. Shall I call a doctor? She got up from the bed. Yes, the girl barely breathed out. A nurse came running. They went together to the labor room. How Selena was scolded there, that she tolerated so long and did not say anything to anyone. But other than that, everything went well. Thank you, John shouted as the doors of the hospital opened and a package with a blue bow was brought out. Home? The wife asked. Yes, only I've rented another apartment. He didn't let her ask or say anything, covered her mouth with a kiss. And then Selena herself didn't remember what she wanted to ask. They arrived in the new neighborhood. She walked into the apartment and was surprised. Everything that had been lying in a big pile in the old apartment was now disassembled. The crib stood packed, all the things in the dresser. Did you do all this yourself? The young mother marveled. Oliver and I did, smiled the husband. He spent all day with his son, as if he was afraid of losing him. Put him down for a minute. Selena wanted him to pay attention to her too. Look, he's smiling at me, John said. Don't make it up. He can't do that yet. Selena walked over and Oliver was indeed lying there, smiling. I am the luckiest woman, she said. Lately, Selena had been worried about not being able to tell her parents that she had a baby. What would she tell them? Sorry for lying to you for so long. No, she couldn't. Tom was 6 months old when John came home late at night. Selena woke up when he slammed the door. She expected John to come into the room, but he wasn't there. Where are you? It became scary to the girl that it might not have been her husband. Here, he moaned. Selena immediately jumped out of bed, ran out into the hallway. John was there half sitting, half lying down. What? She leaned over him and saw that he was covered in something red. She realized it immediately, started unbuttoning it. Stay out of it. Her husband rudely pushed her away. You need help. She sat down beside him. It's okay. He wrinkled his nose. I can see it's nothing normal. She went to the kitchen, got the first aid kit, brought it out, and handed it to her husband. I'm sorry. I could hear him breathing heavily. And in the morning, the police arrived. Selena had been expecting it, so she wasn't really surprised. John was almost unconscious when they took him away. She never knew what had happened to him. Sleep, son. She sat up and stroked the baby on his back. Tears rained down her cheeks. He had never listened to her. He had started all over again, even though he had promised that nothing like that would happen again. Selena was scared. What if someone came to her? What would she do then? She had a small child in her arms. Every night when it got dark, she shut the windows and kept the lights off. She took Tom in her arms and sat there until the baby fell asleep. Then she lay down herself. Mommy, hello. She decided to make this call. Daughter, where have you been? The woman spoke excitedly. Everything is fine. I'm happy. I have a son was born. You and Daddy are now grandparents, said Selena in a joyful voice, so as not to show how scared she was. Do you want me to come to you? Where are you now? Her mother asked. No, it's okay. We'll come to you ourselves, promised the daughter. Before she dialed the number, she thought she would talk to her parents now and then go to them. But if John had ill wishes, wouldn't they know where her mom lived? And just as she was talking, the thought struck her. Selena sat staring at the phone. She didn't know who to call. She had no relatives or friends in this town. Oliver. She even jumped up from the couch. Selena walked over to the nightstand where the phone stood. John's address book was always lying there. She never opened it, but he looked at the phones there. Oliver. She dialed the number quickly, but there were only long beeps. Selena sighed and hung up. But an hour later, she dialed the young man's number again, and then again and again, but no one answered. Oliver, where are you? She said into the void. A month later, Oliver called. Hello. He seemed to be listening to her mood. Oliver, where have you been? She screamed into the phone. Can I come over? He spoke quickly. Of course, she cried. They didn't speak again on the phone. Half an hour later, the young man was at her house. What happened? Where is John now? What has he done? She beat his chest with her fists and cried. Calm down, somehow. I'll tell you everything. He led her into the kitchen so that the child would not see how the mother was behaving. How can I calm down when this has happened, sitting here, locked up, not showing my nose to the street? She was still crying. You're doing the right thing, Oliver, just as John had done, went to the window and looked down. Who's there? Selena yelled. No one. He turned to her. What are you looking at then? She couldn't help but scream. Selena, please calm down. Let's talk calmly. He took her by the shoulders. Now she went and washed her face. She returned to the kitchen already without tears, but her voice was still shaking. John's in a bad situation. I won't say what kind of situation. Less you know, more you sleep. But you need to get out of here for a while. He sat in front of her, holding her hands. Where to? She didn't understand. I rented an apartment in the village next door. I need to live there for a while. He tried to look into her eyes. Alone? She looked at him blankly. Why alone with Tony? You want me to come over? He spoke very calmly. Okay, Selena felt like she didn't have a life anymore, not having someone around to support and help. Then get ready, he went to the window again. The girl gathered her things and her son, turned to Oliver. Ready? He could see that she wasn't herself, maybe because of the tantrum she'd had recently. Yes, she looked at her son. The young man had him in his arms. Let's go then. They went down to the street, got into a car that was parked around the corner and drove off. Oliver brought her to where he said he would. There was a small house there. From the outside it seemed unremarkable, like so many others. But inside, everything was just as it should be. Darling, you have to live here for a little while. A year and a half. He sat down in front of her again, looked into her face, and spoke. Wow, a little while, she grinned. I'll be there for you, I promise. He stood up and pulled her against him, just like John always did. Okay, is there groceries here? She looked up. Yes. Oliver led her into the kitchen. He opened the refrigerator and all the cabinets. Wow, were you preparing for war? Selena saw that those were bursting with cereal, canned goods, and other food. You don't need to go out yet. He pressed his finger to his lips. I realized she was no longer as confused as she had seemed before. Stay then, and I'll be right there. He kissed her cheek and walked out of the cabin. Selena closed the doors and went to settle into her new home. Apparently, the place had been cleaned recently because everywhere was clean. Then Selena decided to make something to eat. She turned around and saw Tom crawling towards her. The boy was making attempts to get up and was already doing so against the wall. The house had everything she needed to live, so Selena didn't need to go out, and she didn't want to. When a picture of John came into view, Selena would cry so hard you'd think her husband was dead. But she couldn't help it. 3 weeks passed. There was a knock on the door. Her heart began to pound frantically in her chest. Who is it? She came over. Selena, it's me, Oliver, answered the guest. Startled, she opened. I'm sorry I've been gone so long. You're probably out of groceries too. He brought several large bags inside. I've got enough for another year, she laughed. I see you're feeling better, he smiled too. Yes, I started knitting. You know how soothing it is. She showed him the different products. While she was learning, so it was mostly scarves. You should definitely get one. He tried to encourage her again. Stop doing that. You don't have to. She gave him a palm on the shoulder. It's okay. John was my friend. Oliver continued to do something and Selena froze. Why was he? She stared at him point blank. No, it's okay. It's just, he's not around right now, he realized. Tell me the truth. They took him away. He was unconscious, Selena mumbled. Why would you do that? He wouldn't want you to know that, Oliver lowered his eyes. Tell me, she insisted. Your husband will probably go to jail, and the sentence will be a decent one, the young man exhaled. I knew it. She covered her face, but for some reason she didn't want to cry. Selena, it's going to be okay. He put his arm around her shoulders. Yes, I know. She took his hand and pulled it away. I'm sorry. He was embarrassed. After that, Oliver started coming almost every day. He brought Selena flowers, paid his respects, gave Tom gifts. What's all this for? She asked him. I like you. Why ruin your youth? The young man did not hide anything. Oliver, I cannot. I have John. She turned away from him because as a friend he suited her, but lately she noticed that he does not behave quite so. So what? You're going to go and become the boss's wife again? He sat down on the couch. What? She made big eyes. You thought he hadn't told anyone? Grinned the guest. No, she tilted her head. How much she didn't know about her husband. Did he write you any letters? He asked another question. No, she shook her head. Did you? As if there was an interrogation going on. No, she said quietly. What was there to talk about then? Oliver was very sure. Still, you're his friend. Selena couldn't go for such a betrayal. They stayed in that settlement for exactly 8 months. After that, Oliver said, everything calmed down. And when Selena returned to the apartment, which, as it turned out, her husband had bought while she was in the hospital, and he'd put it in Selena's name, so he must have known there'd be trouble. That's when she realized that it would be difficult to live alone. Her husband used to provide for her. Then when she was in the village, Oliver, and now. Hi, he called her. How are you? Good, will you come over? Now Selena wondered what Oliver would think of her. Yes, he would. He was ready to rush to her at a moment's notice. She'd arranged a romantic dinner for them that night. Hey, come on in. I'll put Tom to bed, and then I'll be there, she whispered to Oliver when she opened the door. Okay, he also replied. Selena was in the kitchen in a few minutes. Is today some kind of holiday? The young man asked. No, I just wanted to sit with you and talk. She was shy. By candlelight? He raised an eyebrow. Why not? Let it be romantic. If there was a light on, he would notice her cheeks flaming. Okay. Oliver opened the sparkling wine, pouring it into glasses. They took a sip each, silent. The young man looked at the girl. He liked her very much. Do you know when I noticed you? He asked. No, her cheeks never stopped burning. Then, at the dacha, after your wedding, I could not understand how a brutal man like John could seduce someone like you. He took her hand. Why couldn't he? Selena didn't understand. I don't know. You're so delicate, so vulnerable. He kissed her palm. Oliver, do you think it's right? She meant their relationship. I think John will understand. He pulled his chair closer to hers. I'm kind of uncomfortable, Selena said shyly. It's okay, I'm not rushing things. We need a divorce first, and then we'll see what we do. He averted his eyes. I didn't think it would be necessary to get a divorce. She got up from her chair. You don't want to legitimize the relationship in the future, was surprised Oliver. I don't know, it seemed like the evening had been ruined by all this talk. Okay, come here. You don't need to think about that right now. He pulled Selena to him and sat her on his lap. Oliver came to Selena every day now. At first, it was just kisses and hugs. After 6 months, they were a full-fledged family. Dad, Tom ran up to Oliver. Selena. She was looking at the girl. If you don't mind, I don't mind either, said the one. Of course, he lifted the boy on his knees. They looked at something in a book. You still haven't decided to get a divorce? He asked her once. Look, do you feel that bad? She didn't understand it. Sometimes at night, Selena wondered why John didn't write to her. On the one hand, she understood him. Perhaps he didn't want his wife and son to worry. But on the other hand, she knew everything about him. Why not write? She would be supportive. No, it was okay. Oliver had said so, but it wasn't true. He didn't want to fight, so he didn't insist on anything. Now that they were living together, Selena could see that Oliver, just like John had once done, was leaving home. He had plenty of money, but not enough for anything. Oliver, tell me the truth. They had breakfast. Why would you do that? He poured coffee for himself and her. I don't want it to turn out like it did with John. I won't get over it. She was telling the truth. I promise you I'll never leave you, and if anything bad happens, I'll always come to your rescue. He kissed her. I believe you. She nuzzled her cheek against his. Tom went to daycare. He came in bruised all the time. What happened again? Selena asked her son. Why are they teasing me? Frowned the boy. What do they say? The mother was curious. That my daddy is in jail. He folded his arms across his chest. You see, there's your daddy at home. Why believe in other people's gossip? She pointed at Oliver. He didn't interfere with her upbringing, afraid he'd do something wrong. When Tom's kindergarten graduation was in September and he had to go to school, Selena decided to go to her parents. Are you coming with us? She asked Oliver. If you'll take me, he teased Tom. Sure, what are you asking? She walked over to them. They planned when it would be. After that, Selena called her parents, so it wouldn't be spontaneous. Oh my God, daughter, it's been years. Selena heard her mom crying. Over the weekend, they got in the car as a family and drove. Oliver, can I ask you something? The girl turned to him. Sure, why do you ask? He put his hand on her knee. Mom will ask a lot of questions. She doesn't know who I left with or where I went. She can only assume. So let's just say you were the husband after Sam. If we don't, imagine the questions, she said, staring straight ahead. Of course we will, he agreed with her. When they drove up to the house where the girl lived, tears came to her eyes. Honey, what are you doing? Oliver looked at his beloved. I don't know, nostalgia or something, she shrugged. Mom, who lives here? My son asked from the back seat. Grandma, she turned to kiss him, but he turned away. I'm not little anymore, he told her. Come on, let's go. She got out of the car and helped Tom out. Oliver got everything out of the trunk, and they headed for the driveway. Who's there? I heard it from behind the door. Mom, Selena said. Daughter, the woman opened the door and froze. She didn't know who to hug first, but she pressed the girl against her. Hi, Grandma, Tom said. How big you are already. She leaned over and hugged him too. Hello, it was Oliver's turn to give the woman. Anyone who remembers the past is. He didn't finish. Okay, understood, laughed the girl and sat down at the table. It had been so long since they'd seen each other that they'd done nothing but talk and talk. Oliver and his father went out on the balcony a few times, and the mother and daughter kept chattering like magpies. At some point, Tom got tired of it and went to bed, and the women cleared the table and sat in the kitchen for a long time. Oh, Selena, I didn't think you'd have such a life, said her mother, folding her arms across her chest, and she didn't know the whole truth. It's okay, you don't have to worry, her daughter reassured her. And now I see that you're doing well, so there's nothing to worry about. You just come to visit, or bring Tom. They hugged again, for the 100th time that evening. It was a good time, driving back. Yeah, your parents are great, Oliver agreed. Am I still going to Grandma's? Shouted Tom. Sure, laughed the parents. They were home, all was well. Oliver went out, as before, and came back sometimes at night, sometimes in the morning, but Selena didn't say anything to him. As long as he didn't come back like John had, she thought about it all the time. Are you ready? Oliver came into the room. He had to go to the lineup. Yes, shouted the son and mom. Today, everyone was happy and cheerful, and in the evening, the man invited the family to a restaurant. The first class went quickly. It was difficult, but Tom tried. In the summer, he asked to go to his grandmother. That's where they sent him. And Oliver and Selena flew south, to the sea. Everything was good in the family. No one ever fought. Everyone loved each other. Sometimes Selena looked at her son and saw John in him. She never told him about his own father, she thought. That the time would come, he would ask, and she would tell. Every summer, the boy went to his grandmother's house, and she loved him. Until the 5th grade, Tom generally loved it, and then began to be capricious. Mother and father did not insist on the fact that he must necessarily spend the whole summer at his grandmother's house and Mako for a month. The boy agreed to such a compromise. This morning, he had to go to the lineup. Tom was already in 7th grade. Did Oliver call? His mother shouted from the room. No, the son answered her. Strange, he could not miss such a thing, could not understand where he was. Selena. It's okay, we'll go alone, approached her son. How mature you are. She kissed him on the top of his head. Selena put on shoes, the guy's shoes. He took his backpack, mom flowers. They left the apartment. It wasn't that far to school, so they got there quickly. That's it, don't go any further. The boy stopped near the gate. What's wrong? Mom made a surprised face. Mom, I'm going to the 7th grade, not the 1st. He looked serious. Okay, go. She saw her parents standing there. Oliver never showed up for the lineup, and he wasn't home that evening either. Selena was nervous. She called him, but his phone was unavailable. Oliver, please call or answer, she asked, looking at the phone, but he was silent. A month passed. The man never returned. Selena was afraid to contact the authorities because the man was connected to crime. She was beginning to think that the same thing had happened to her husband. "Mom, why are you so sad?" Tom came up to her. They were preparing for the new year. "Where is Oliver? Why isn't he with us?" She looked at the tree she wanted to decorate. "Let's go outside, go to the square, look at the big slide, the lights," Tom called her. "Let's go." Selena waved her hand. Why should she suffer when she had a son who didn't need her decadent mood? They left the apartment, and just as she was about to close the door, someone shoved her back in. "Mom!" Tom shouted. The door closed in his face, and he was left on the landing. "You weren't expecting me." Selena saw John's angry face. "What are you doing here?" She tried to get out of his arms. "I came home, and here my wife is living the good life," he grinned. "What are you talking about?" Her eyes were big with terror. "Are you afraid?" He laughed. "John, you're insane." Her voice trembled. "Okay, Luv." He pushed her away, then opened the door. The guy had been chiseling at her the whole time. "Who are you?" He ran into the apartment and saw his mom lying on the floor. "Tom, it's me, your dad," he said in a completely different voice. "What?" He looked at the woman and the man. "Yes, Tom, it's true. He's your real dad," Selena confirmed. "You told me." The boy stopped talking. John walked over to his wife. He lifted her off the floor with one tug. "So, Selena, is dinner ready?" "Husband's back from prison," he said with a sneer. "Yes, now." She went to the kitchen on woozy legs. There were so many thoughts in her head that she could not grasp any of them. The woman decided to act casual, as if nothing had happened. She heated up what had been prepared, put it on plates, and called her husband over. "Oh wow, Royal." He rubbed his hands together and sat down. "Why are you acting like this?" She sat down across from him. "How?" He started chewing. "Like it's my fault." She was picking at her salad with her fork. "Who's to blame me?" He looked up at her. "You came that night. You didn't explain anything. Then they took you away. What was I to think? Why didn't you write?" Selena cried. "What could I explain to you? Everything was said to Oliver, who then took you away." Anger began to appear in her voice again. "John, I was hurting, and I was also scared, and Oliver helped me." She tried to tell everything so that he wouldn't get angry again. "You'd think I was having fun out there." He snorted and continued eating. "What are you going to do now?" She forced herself to ask the question. "Nothing. I'm back with my family. Now we'll live like before." He smiled. "Do you think we can do it like we used to?" It was all aflame inside. "Why not?" He raised his eyebrows as if he was surprised. "John, I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. I was just a weak woman with a child in my arms, so I gave in to temptation." She chose a different tactic. "That's it. I'm back. Now the family is reunited. We'll live, raise our son." He looked in the corridor. The boy was nowhere to be found. "Good," smiled Selena. She thought that it is not worth to inflame the situation. Time will pass, everything will be solved by itself. "And where is your new boyfriend?" The man froze, waiting for an answer. "I do not know. It was the truth." "That's good. He's gone. He probably knew I'd be back." John laughed. That night, Selena asked her husband if he would let her sleep with her son. He agreed, but just for that night. "Mom," whispered Tom when they had already turned out the light. "What?" She realized the boy had a lot of questions. "What's going to happen to us now?" She could hear his voice shaking. "Everything will be fine." She stroked her son's head. In the morning, the woman hurried to get up early to make breakfast. She didn't want to make anyone nervous. "How wonderful it is." Got up. "And here everything is already ready." Her husband came to the kitchen. No need. She didn't turn to him. Selena is mine. He came over and hugged her from behind. What are you doing? Tom will say. She tried to push him away. Don't you dare try anything else, he said angrily, right in her face. I got it. She turned her back to the stove again. Selena cried quietly as John kissed her neck. I woke up and washed my face. Tom walked into the kitchen. Favorite son, John turned to the boy. Don't come near me, said the lad angrily. He saw the marks the man's fingers had left on his mother's neck. Why are you being so mean to me? His father thrust himself at him. Stop it, shouted Selena. Okay, I'm just kidding. Why are you starting? He immediately changed his mood, sitting down at the table. It went on like this all day, and at night, John grabbed her arm as she went to Tom's room. Where are you going? My husband missed you. He pulled her to him. You've been gone practically 13 years. I need to get used to it. She looked him in the eye, thinking it would make him feel better. But it didn't work. He just threw her on the bed. Selena just prayed that her son wouldn't walk in at this point. After all that, the man just turned away and snored. Selena went to the bathroom. She sat there for a couple hours. After that, she came out and headed to Tom. Mom, did he hit you in there? Her son asked. No, it's okay. She pulled him close to her. That night, the woman thought that next time she would call the police and they would take him away. And then came the thought of if she didn't make it in time, then what would he do to them? This morning, Selena could see that he had no pity for anyone, not her or her son. John, it's New Year's Eve. Come on, you're not going to act like this. She asked him this morning at breakfast. Okay, if you're going to be a goody two-shoes, he smiled at her again. Selena thought that he must have been beaten up, and now something has happened to his head. That's why he's acting like that. Tom, let's go decorate the Christmas tree, called out to her son's mother after dinner. It had been standing in their room like that since that evening. All right, ran the boy over to his mother. Joan hadn't been home all day. It was such a relief. Mom, why don't you complain to Grandma? Asked Tom. What are you doing? You can't do that under any circumstances. She will get very upset. Mom pressed her finger to her lips. Okay, but how long are we going to put up with this? He took the toy, and when he didn't hear the answer, he turned to his mom. Son, I'm sorry. I don't know, she cried. Why doesn't Oliver come to us? Is he afraid of him too? The boy didn't understand. I think something happened to him. She wiped away her tears. Was it his fault too? That's all my son ever called John. You know what I thought of? Let's pack our things. I have money, rent an apartment, and move out of his place. Selena's eyes widened. Why didn't she say anything when he left this morning? Tom rushed to his room. But they didn't have time to do anything. Her husband and father came home. He wasn't quite himself. Oh, family, he hiccuped. You need to get some sleep, Selena asked him. Okay, just with you. He took her hand, and they went to the couch. Tom felt so bad for his mother, and also that he couldn't do anything about it. John plopped down on the bed and pulled Selena with him. She didn't resist. He was in such a state that he fell asleep immediately. She lay there for a little longer and then went back to her son. No, Tom, we are not going anywhere with you. He will find us everywhere, and it will be worse there. She hugged him. He won't kill you. That was a mother's worst question. I hope not, she thought to herself. She had made such a life for herself. In the evening, Selena and Tom sat at the table, waiting for the chimes to strike, just in time for the head of the family to wake up. Okay, I'll sit with you, he said in a hoarse voice. Selena poured champagne for herself and him, and Tom had a splash of soda. At the sound of the clock, John raised his glass, winked at his wife, and drank. After that, he went back to bed. The woman and the boy exhaled with relief. The New Year's vacation passed more or less quietly. John was celebrating all these days, so he didn't care about anyone. He just sat in the kitchen for a while and then slept. Selena and Tom went out unhindered, walking around, coming back. I wish he was dead. They went into the driveway one day. Son, you can't say that, his mother whispered to him. Can you do that to us? He almost cried, though he hadn't done it for a long time. Quiet. She was so used to that word that she said it all the time. They entered the apartment. It was quiet. Selena went into Tom's room. They spent most of their time there now. I'm hungry, her son showed her. Now, she said with just her lips. Selena left the room and went to the kitchen. Where have you been? Stood and staggered her husband in the hallway. John, please go get some sleep. She put her hands together. What? He wailed throughout the house. Please, Selena cried. What are you asking me to do? He wrinkled his nose. For you to leave me and Tom alone. She turned around. Her son was in the room. Fuck you. He kicked her, and she flew off, hitting the wall. You touch her. Tom saw everything. He felt so sorry for his mom. He stood there clenching his fists, but he couldn't do anything because he was afraid of him. Go to your room before you get it, yelled his father at him. After that, he just walked over his wife, went to the kitchen, and then went back to sleep. Mommy, whispered Tom. Sonny, she's come to her senses. I'm going to call the police now. He was ready to do it. No, you don't have to. She managed to get up. She was dizzy. After that, Selena lay down on the bed. Her son brought a wet towel. She put it on her head. I promise you, we will leave tomorrow. She couldn't put herself and her son in any more danger. I believe you, Mommy. He leaned on her chest and cried. It's okay, honey. Everything will be fine. It can't go black all the time. Tears were flowing from her eyes. She didn't want to show them to her child. That afternoon, Selena installed a bolt in Tom's room that she had taken off the toilet door. Do you think it will help us? The child doubted it. I don't know. Maybe Selena wasn't sure about it herself, but at least there was some protection. At night, Selena counted the money she had, enough to rent an apartment for a few months. She packed a bag where she put the essentials for herself and her son. There were also documents. Then she went to her room, closed the door, and sat down in a chair. Mom, why don't you go to bed? Tom asked. I can't. I have a headache, she said. During the night, Selena heard John get up, but he didn't even come to their door. When Tom's alarm clock went off, she flinched. Tom, get up, she pushed her son. They got dressed in the room, and when they were in the hallway, John came out. Where are you going? He leaned on the door jamb. Selena looked at him, trying to determine what state he was in. For a walk, she said, and smiled. Again? Not having a walk? He grabbed her by the cloak. Let Mama go, Tom shouted. And you shut up in general. Don't take me out, or it will be worse. He made big eyes and looked at his son. Tom ran off, as everyone thought, to his room. John, let go, Selena asked. She thought these angry outbursts would just come and go. Why do you keep telling me to let go? Let go, come on. He lifted her off the floor and threw her. Ah, it hurt. Selena thought she even blacked out for a moment. Not enough. Let go some more. He kicked her. Get away from her. The boy came out of the kitchen, a knife blade glinting in his hand. Are you going to throw yourself at me? He winked at his son. At that moment, Selena regained consciousness. She swung the coat rack, which fell right on her husband. What? Everyone is against me. He looked around. Son, go to the room and shut yourself in there. Tried to shout mother, but from the throat came out a kind of wheeze. You still don't get it. He went back to his wife. I said get away from her. Tom didn't move. He was ready to be attacked. Yeah, now I'll deal with her first and then you. Puppy. He shook his wife. No. Selena was hit. She closed her eyes. Tom ran at his father. He knocked the knife out of his hands and pushed the boy away. He flew to the door of the room. I'm going to make you dance. He went to his wife again because he thought the boy had nothing left to give. She didn't move, so John decided to take a break and go to the kitchen. He did just that. The mother opened her eyes, saw her son lying in the hallway, not moving. "Tom." She started to call out to him, but he didn't move. "What are you yelling about?" John came up to her. "You can't handle anyone else, just a woman and a child." She couldn't open her eyes fully. "What do you know who, and what can I do with?" He was looming again. "No, I think you're a coward and always have been." Selena saw her son had moved and was now creeping into his room, so she needed to distract the man. "What? I've never been a coward, but Oliver is one." He spit on the floor. "Do you know where he is?" His wife asked him. "Of course I do. He's the one who got me hurt. We came to the shooting. We didn't expect them to have guns, and when they started shooting, Oliver pulled out his gun. 112, they hit the cars, and it was like they were dead or alive. He yelled, 'Oliver, Oliver, Oliver,' and he was gone too." He told it all with such anger that the drawer was flying in different directions. It was clear now how many years he had kept this anger in himself, and now he decided to express it. "Did you just make that up?" Selena wanted to bring him out of his memories. "Naturally, everything was pinned on me, and I, like a fool, did not turn myself in. I thought that my friend covered for me, and he started making out with my wife. The trial hadn't been held yet, and you were already together, and my eyes blowed. I was scared and he helped me," Selena screamed. "It's about to get even scarier." He leaned over her, taking her by the chin, just like when she met him. "John, please." She saw him swinging. She squeezed her eyes shut. "What, scared?" He was mocking her. "I never realized you had so much anger in you," Selena said with such contempt that she was disgusted. "Do you know where your Oliver is?" He was in her face. "Where?" She didn't think she was gonna hear anything good. "The worms ate him a long time ago." "No, I found him first, and we went to talk. And soon you'll be there with him." He put his hand around her neck, and Selena fainted again. John went to the kitchen. He noticed that Tom wasn't in the hallway. He wanted to go in and see him, but then he waved his hand. He wasn't going anywhere. Selena came to her senses, moaned, but called only her husband to her. "That's it, let's go." He scooped her up. At this point, Tom heard it all, but he couldn't get up because he was under the bed. He just covered his eyes with his hands and cried. John was dragging Selena. She didn't have any strength to resist. She felt them go outside, and then he threw her into the car. No, not into the passenger compartment, but into the trunk. The woman felt her shoulder bump hard. Fear gripped every muscle, not only for herself, but for her son. He was alone. What would happen when John came back? "God, please help Tom. May he be all right," she prayed quietly as the car moved. Selena felt her lips swell. She couldn't move them, she groaned. It was a long ride, and she dozed off because she was seasick and tired. She heard her husband's voice. He was carrying her again, but it must have been heavy, so he put her on the ground so that she could walk on her own. Selene felt the cold from the snow, but kept silent. She couldn't see anything with her eyes. Perhaps something had been thrown over her head. "Forgive me," she whispered, lips unmoving. "God will forgive." He pushed her ahead of him, Selena cried. She realized that now the man would stop at nothing. It's true what they say about those who have been to places not so far away, and then want to go back again. "Please come to your senses. We have a little son. How will he be without us?" "He will be put in an orphanage," the woman asked. "Why not without us? His mother is out partying and his father is at home. Him get used to it." It was hard to walk, but John grinned. Selena realized that they were no longer in the city. There was a lot of snow. Her husband knew exactly where they were going, or not, and he was driven by anger. Finally, they stopped. He pulled off what was on her head. Selene could see now that they were in a forest, with only white canvas and trees around them. "What, scared?" He took her by the chin. "Yes." She looked into his black eyes again. "So if someone hurts me, they end up like this." He pulled out a rope. What are you going to do?" She squealed out of control. On the car ride, the woman still had some hope that John would come to his senses. He just wanted to scare her into being dependent on him. But now, she could see that this wasn't a joke at all. "What do you think?" He pushed her and she felt the wood. "I'm just going to freeze out here, you monster," she cried. "No, you won't freeze. You won't have time. The wolves will eat you before that. Believe me, I know there are plenty of them here." He went on with his business. "You'll get it all back." She's out of arguments. "Think of how much pain I've been in all these years." Selena thought John was smiling. So much pleasure it all gave him. "You bastard, you said you loved me so much, and now what are you doing? Believe me, nothing good will come of this act for you. Even if I am eaten by wolves, I will not give you peace. I will torture you for the rest of your life." She shouted all this, and it seemed to herself that she had already gone crazy. Yes, yes, be deceived. He had tied the knot. "Help!" She shouted into the night sky. "No one can hear you here. Even if you scream, for many kilometers there is no one and nothing. Only you and nature." He took her by the chin again. "Save me, ah!" Selena screamed as loud as she could. "Shut up!" He hit her. She passed out. Selena doesn't know how long she was unconscious. She woke up from the cold, her legs straight up with cramps, her own scream stuck in her throat. "Help!" She twisted her head around, but she couldn't see anything. The woman cried. She realized that her screams would not do any good, but would only make things worse. If there were any animals here that her husband had mentioned, they had already heard her. And now it was winter. Most likely wolves at this time are very hungry and angry. "Shoo!" She began to hiss. Her lips were not listening. Not only were they abrasions, but the cold was so cold. "Shh! Get out of here!" She felt the presence of someone, or maybe it was just her imagination. And then she saw the glint in his eyes. Her insides clenched. Selena imagined the pack attacking her now. The wolves were closing the circle. She remembered a phrase from a book, but she could only see two of them. And then she heard a whistle and thought she saw a light. "Help! I'm here!" She started to make some noises. Selena thought she was screaming very loudly, but in reality, it was just a croak coming from her throat. Selena saw the beast scurry away as another one appeared where she was. It sort of barked, but it did so in an unusual way. She stood. She felt like she was already somewhere not here, because that couldn't be the case. The beast seemed to be fighting for prey. "Selena!" She heard Oliver's voice. At that moment, the woman thought that everything had already happened and she was gone. And she felt nothing, because it was very cold, and so much adrenaline was released into the bloodstream. She lost consciousness again. "Love, remember I always told you I'd be there for you no matter what happened to you." She heard him through the fog. Oliver. She wanted to touch him, but at the last moment she pulled her hand away because she realized she was dreaming. "Love, wake up." His voice was blurry and sounded far away. Selena felt warm. She groaned, then opened her eyes. She looked around. It was a house, log walls, whitewashed ceiling. "John!" She called out. She thought her torment continued. He had taken pity, untied her, and now he had brought her here. "Selene, have you come to your senses?" Oliver entered the room. "It can't be. Am I dead or asleep?" The woman pinched herself. She wanted to raise herself, but couldn't do it. Her legs hurt. "Calm down. It's me." He crouched on the edge of the bed. She took his hand in hers, pressed it to her cheek, and sobbed. Apparently, John's brains had atrophied so much that he'd decided to take everyone to the same place. He leaned over and kissed her hair. "Where were you? Why didn't you come to us, protect us?" She cried, her cheeks beginning to burn. "I couldn't. But that's not the point. I need to rub you again." He touched the spot where her cheeks burned. "What's wrong with me?" She touched her hand where he had touched her cheeks. It hurt like a burn. "Your face is a little frostbitten, But your legs are worse. Oliver pulled back the blanket, and Selena looked at her limbs, which were red. Wow, a little. She leaned back on the pillow, and the man started rubbing something greasy on her. Now let's get this done. You'll be good as new in a week, Oliver smiled. What's that? She wrinkled her nose and plugged it with her fingers. It's a super remedy, badger fat. It's a cure for everything. He showed her the jar, which had only a little left in it. Oliver, what are you doing here? How did you find me? She felt much better now that her feet and face were smeared. Selena, I'll tell you everything, but a little later. You're still weak, not ready. He put her back on the bed. Wolf. She made big eyes and looked somewhere behind Oliver. What? He turned around. There was indeed a wolf sitting on the doorstep, but it wasn't quite like that. I'm scared. She couldn't stop the terror from coming. Don't be afraid. It's Polkan. He made a gesture. The animal approached. Am I in a fairy tale? She looked at her man with big eyes. No, it's really a wolf, but a tame one. He patted it behind the ears. After that, Oliver left, but quickly returned, a tray with a bowl of porridge and tea in his hands. Selena felt like she hadn't eaten anything in a while. Don't. She took the spoon from his hands when he wanted to feed her himself. Let's do it yourself then. He nodded his head and sat down next to the bed. Tom, after the first spoonful, she suddenly looked up at the man. What? He stirred too. He stayed at home. Selena wanted to set her plate aside, but Oliver did not let her do it. I guess he won't be interested in the guy without you. He gestured for her to eat. God, how long will all this last? The porridge was very tasty. The woman ate everything, drank tea. Need to sleep. He helped her lie down and covered her with a blanket. We'll find him, won't we? She was talking about her son. Of course, don't even think about bad things. The man kissed her. In the evening, when Selena was much better, Oliver rubbed her again with badger fat. You're so thoughtful. She sat up in bed. Can you get up? He gave her a hand. Let's try, the woman agreed. Selena got to her feet, Oliver supporting her, and they walked out of the room and into the small kitchen. There was a stove, a table, and carved benches. Do you like it? He sat her down on one of them. Very much. Tell me all about it, she asked. Then, at the end of August, I went to buy Tom a gift for September 1. He began to recall and put the kettle on, began to arrange cups, saucers, and cookies on the table. Well, what are you silent again? She waited for the continuation. I came to the store, got out of the car, and there was John. He appeared suddenly, so I was a little scared. Oliver realized that if Selena asked her husband something, he could tell her everything in a heartbeat. I had the same thing. She lowered her eyes. So we hugged. He said he'd recently gotten out. I congratulated him, and then we went to a cafe to celebrate. He was silent again. Is that hard for you to remember or what? She was worried about the man. We sat there until almost midnight, and then John asked to take him to one of the villages that were near the city. Oliver looked at the woman and smiled. He realized that everything he would tell her next would not please her very much. But you've been drinking, she made big eyes. Just a little bit. We left the place, got in the car. Your husband looked normal, let's go. Oliver saw that the kettle was boiling, began to pour boiling water into cups. Well, enough with the stories at such long intervals, Selena asked him. She didn't want any more tea, only to know what happened to her beloved then. Well, he showed me the way. Ahead showed the forest. I was surprised. What village could be in the forest? But John assured me that now we will pass it, and there everything will be just. It is the shortest road. He sat down next to the woman he loved and took her hand. And you came to this forest? She guessed. Yeah, I don't know what John's connection to this place is. Maybe it's where they brought him in the 90s for a showdown. But the fact remains, he lowered his eyes. What did he do to you? Selena put her palms to her mouth. Asked me to stop, was done. He got out of the car. I followed him. Then he shot me. Oliver didn't look her in the eye. How? It was horrible to even imagine it. In his legs, he lifted his pants. There was a scar on each leg. Beloved, she pressed herself against him. And then I did the same thing I did to you. But in your case, you would have either frozen or been eaten. I had a nasty bug that you can't get rid of, and it hurt like hell. I don't know how long I spent in there, delirious, awake and unconscious. But I was lucky Selena thought he was crying. Just as I did, she kissed him. He probably agreed with her. And who rescued you? She was waiting for the rest. The local forester. He was here that week, in this very cabin. He had to get everything ready for winter, so he came. And Polkan, his own wolf, which he had tamed, had found me. What one man can do, she thought of her son again. Yeah, Grandpa Jacob got me here, and then he nursed me back to health. I was delirious for days. I thought I was somewhere else in the world. And the old man thought we were bandits, sorting things out here, and I got such a terrible execution. The man smiled. And then, why didn't you come back? She kept waiting for that answer. Afraid, Oliver didn't hide it. That's understandable. She turned away from the window, tears streaming from her eyes. I decided to live here for a while, let him think I was dead. So it would be easier for everyone. He didn't touch Selena, realizing that it wasn't easy for her either. Didn't you think about me? She asked the big question. Of course I did, every day. But first of all, I couldn't get up for a long time. And secondly, how could I help you? Because we're nobody to each other. He wanted to hold her against him so badly that he squeezed his eyes shut. Where is your grandfather Jacob now? She decided to change the subject. In the village, I guess, he shrugged. Okay, buddy, calm down, it's going to be okay. Grandpa walked into the kitchen. Selena sat looking at him. Hello, she said quietly. I see the frost didn't spare you. He pointed at his cheeks, which, apparently, were also frostbitten. Oliver is helping me. She looked at the jar of badger fat. That's right, that's good. He sat down on the edge of the bench. Grandpa Jacob, we have to get out of here. Selena's son is staying there, and he's been looking to the old man for support, as usual, for the last few months. I have transportation, he said slyly. Can you help me? Oliver was glad. Sure, the old man clapped himself on his knees. Come with me. They went outside, went to where the woodpile was. When they were close, Oliver stopped. Well, what are you up to? The grandfather took one hand to the tarp that hung from the roof. Now, a man came up. They yanked it once, another when it fell. Then in front of the men was something like a garage, only cold. Here it is, my dear, never let me down. Grandpa Jacob stroked the snowmobile. Where did he get all this good stuff? Oliver wondered. Grateful hunters, though not new, but on the move, he drove it from where it stood. All day, he and his grandfather worked on the machinery. They had to grease the chain, fill it with fuel, check if everything worked. When the old man was sure of everything, he told the guests to dress warmly. Neither of them had warm clothes. Grandpa had found and brought some for Oliver, but Selena was wrapped in what she had. Jacob took the wheel, then the woman got in, and Oliver followed in the back. Let's go, Grandpa shouted, and the snowmobile started off. Selena didn't realize where they were at all, and she couldn't see anything now. The snowmobile was kicking up clouds of snow that covered everything, eyes, nose, and mouth. She hid behind Jacob's grandfather, patient. Well, here we are. He drove them almost all the way to town. Thank you for everything. We'll see each other again. Oliver shook his hand. We promise, Selena supported him. Okay, buddy, calm down. It's going to be okay. Grandpa walked into the kitchen. Selena sat looking at him. Hello, she said quietly. I see the frost didn't spare you. He pointed at his cheeks, which, apparently, were also frostbitten. Oliver is helping me. She looked at the jar of badger fat. That's right, that's good. He sat down on the edge of the bench. Grandpa Jacob, we have to get out of here. Selena's son is staying there, and he's been looking to the old man for support, as usual, for the last few months. I have transportation, he said slyly. Can you help me? Oliver was glad. Sure, the old man clapped himself on his knees. Come with me. They went outside, went to where the woodpile was. When they were close, Oliver stopped. Well, what are you up to? The grandfather took one hand to the tarp that hung from the roof. Now, a man came up. They yanked it once, another when it fell. Then in front of the men was something like a garage, only cold. Here it is, my dear, never let me down. Grandpa Jacob stroked the snowmobile. Where did he get all this good stuff? Oliver wondered. Grateful hunters, though not new, but on the move, he drove it from where it stood. All day, he and his grandfather worked on the machinery. They had to grease the chain, fill it with fuel, check if everything worked. When the old man was sure of everything, he told the guests to dress warmly. Neither of them had warm clothes. Grandpa had found and brought some for Oliver, but Selena was wrapped in what she had. Jacob took the wheel, then the woman got in, and Oliver followed in the back. Let's go, Grandpa shouted, and the snowmobile started off. Selena didn't realize where they were at all, and she couldn't see anything now. The snowmobile was kicking up clouds of snow that covered everything, eyes, nose, and mouth. She hid behind Jacob's grandfather, patient. Well, here we are. He drove them almost all the way to town. Thank you for everything. We'll see each other again. Oliver shook his hand. We promise, Selena supported him. Now it was necessary to get to the nearest branch. It was dangerous to go home. Hello. The woman approached one of the men in uniform who stood at the traffic police post, which the couple reached on foot. Zdorovi wish, the man said. He examined the woman. She was wearing such an outfit that she looked more like a hobo. She looked more like a vagrant, rather than someone who needed real help. We need help. My husband took me into the woods and left me there. She didn't elaborate. It was in the 90s when they went there to bury everyone. The guy was young. He probably saw a lot of action movies, so he laughed at what he didn't know. Anyway, Oliver came up. We need a ride to the department. Can you give us a ride? Sure. He came up to his partner, said something, got behind the wheel of the car, and they drove off. It wasn't that close to the nearest apartment. When they stopped, they got out of the car, thanked the young man. Listen, how can we without documents? They will say that we are beggars. They will not let us in. And what's more, they will lock us up. Selena began to doubt. Let's go. Let's tell the whole truth. If they don't believe us, then we'll deal with it later. He took her hand. They went in. They were escorted to an office where they told everything, and when they saw that they were believed, they showed all their scars and wounds. The man who took them in said that immediate action would be taken. Now home, Selena hurried, for she still didn't know where her baby was. She hoped he was home, which she had warned the staff about, because John could be expected to do anything. She and Oliver made it safely to the yard where they had once lived. They were advised to sit in the neighbor's driveway. They were in a state that their own mother wouldn't recognize. So the couple did. They saw John being led out under their arms. Tom wasn't with them. Selena wanted to rush over to ask where her boy was, but Oliver held her back. We'll find him ourselves. He's a smart boy, he assured the woman. When they got into the apartment, the place was turned upside down. What was he looking for? The landlady couldn't understand. What do you mean? Money? Jewelry? Oliver came up to her. We need to think about where Tom might be. She looked up at him. Let's change first, he laughed. Yeah, Selena wasn't paying attention to what outfit she was wearing, how she looked. Right now, the important thing was different. They quickly found what they needed, now sitting in the kitchen, both of them with their phones in their hands. Call your parents, Oliver asked. No, he knew he couldn't go to them, that his grandmother would be nervous. She shook her head negatively. He had a scare. One woman he loved was taken away. He went to another. Oliver really thought, "No, let's call his friends first." She started dialing the phones of his parents and the guys her son was friends with, but no one had seen him all this time. He couldn't have taken him somewhere too. The man looked at her. "I don't even think about it. Maybe search the basements and attics." Selena threw out options. "Are you sure?" It was winter, so Oliver doubted very much that Tom could do that. "No," she lowered her head. "It'll be okay. Give me the phone." He took her machine, dialed the number. "Where are you calling from?" She wanted to take the phone away from him, but it was already answered. "Hello, how are you?" Oliver was very polite. "Yeah, we were coming to see you too." He smiled and looked at Selena. "Well, see you later." He pressed the red button. "Oliver, why?" She looked at the phone screen where her mother's number was written. "They have Tom," the man said calmly. "What?" She couldn't believe it was that simple. "When I asked how things were going, your mother said she was baking cakes for her grandson, and as I understand it, she doesn't have any other grandchildren besides your son, right?" He stood up and went into the room. "You told her to call them right away," she cried. "Nothing to shed tears. Get ready. Let's go." He was already waiting for her in the hallway. A few hours later, they were already going up to the floor where her parents lived. Selena was only afraid of one thing: if her son told his grandparents everything, how she would explain it all to them. She pressed the bell button. "Who is it?" And again that native voice. Mom pulled a smile on the woman's face. "Hello, dears. Where have you been so long? And how could you send a child alone to us? It's winter outside, and what if something would have happened?" From the doorstep began to reprimand the mother. Selena realized that Tom had lied to her grandmother. She was happy that he had listened to her and done the right thing. "Mom!" He ran out into the hallway. "Hi." Oliver held out his hand, but Tom didn't even pay attention to him. "Son, come on." "That's our Oliver?" she asked. "It's all his fault. Did you hear what he said? He didn't want to talk." "Honey, everything happened as it happened. There's nothing you can do about it now. You have to move on. Oliver helped me. He loves us." Selena realized that she was standing there talking to her son. She waited a little longer and then thought that time would pass. Things would get better again. Together they all walked to the room where Grandma was cutting a cake. They had tea, and when the women were in the kitchen, the mother looked sternly at her daughter. "Who is this one?" She repeated her grandson's words. "Mom, it didn't matter anymore." Selene didn't want the woman to know about such a shameful moment in her life. "Daughter, we have always been close to you. Why won't you tell me?" Her mother turned her to face her and ran her hand over her cheek, which had recently stopped hurting. "Mom, it's over now. Everything will be okay now." Selena hugged her. "Okay, I hope someday you'll tell me all this." A tear rolled down her cheek. The woman saw how her grandson came to her. It was winter, and he was wearing sneakers and a windbreaker. There was a bruise on his cheekbone. At first, she wanted to sound the alarm, thought Oliver might have done it. But when the boy told her that his mom and dad had sent him alone to his grandmother's house, she didn't ask too many questions. She wanted to bide her time. She realized that something terrible had happened, but since her daughter did not tell her anything, she decided not to bother her with questions. The family went home. The apartment needed a lot of redecorating because John had broken everything. "Maybe we should sell this apartment with so many bad reminders?" Oliver asked her. "I was thinking the same thing, but let's wait a little while for things to settle down," she asked him. "I hope you won't mind divorcing that bastard now." They stood in the hallway and hugged. "Of course not." She kissed his chin. "I was so afraid of losing you," he almost cried. "I will always be with you." Selena realized that here he was, her true and only man. "Will you marry me?" He knew the answer, but still, he wanted to hear it. Yes, she felt that they were already connected, but that wasn't enough for her. John was taken into custody, Selena and Oliver detailed everything he'd done. Jacob's grandfather was a witness. At the trial, the man had been declared insane, and it had been decided that he should be evaluated in a mental institution. What did he accomplish? Oliver grinned when he and Selena got home. Everything was fine now. The man and woman had sold the apartment where they'd once lived, and now they were looking for a new place to live. "Dad, I'm sorry." Tom came to him. It's been a year since they met at Grandma's. He hugged the boy. Selena got in. She studied by correspondence, and in the meantime she had time to do everything at home. Oliver was doing well. His business was growing. He no longer rented a garage and bought his own premises, which was in the city limits. "Who's going to tell me who has an accounting degree?" They were lying in bed in the evening talking. "He's not here yet," she laughed. "I'm serious. I need an accountant, and I think a family contract would be just right." He turned to her. "Will you hire Tom? He's been asking for a job for a long time. He decided to finish 9 grades and then go to school to be a motor mechanic to help his father." "Why not?" Oliver wondered why he hadn't asked him himself. Then it was agreed. Everything was fine in the family now. They were standing at the line. Tom was graduating from high school. When one of the girls in a beautiful uniform read a poem, Selena suddenly felt sick. "What's the matter with you?" Her husband picked up on it. Probably the sun. The woman didn't realize it herself. "I don't think the sun has anything to do with it." Oliver winked at her. "You think?" She knew what he meant. "I'm sure." The man walked over to Tom, whispered something in his ear. He turned and showed his mom the class. "What did you say to him?" The wife was shocked. "Nothing, let's go." He took her under his arm, and they walked out of the schoolyard. 7 months later, the family heard the cries of the little princess they all adored. "We should go to the woods and visit Jacob's grandfather," Oliver said, his daughter almost 2 years old by then. "Why not?" Tom agreed, because he already knew the story of what had happened to his parents. True, he had not been told it in detail, but in general terms. Okay, Selena took the baby in her arms. They left the house, got in the car, and all together they headed to the place where it had once been so painful and scary. "Grandpa Jacob." Oliver entered the hut. No one answered him. "Do you know where he lives in the village?" his wife asked him. "No, he did not say. I was only here." They went out into the yard. There wasn't much wood in the woodpile. Oliver walked inside. He pulled back the tarpaulin. As he did then, the snowmobile was standing there. "I think our grandfather is gone," he said as he looked at the equipment. "What makes you think that?" Selena didn't understand. She watched her daughter walk around and look at everything around her. "The chain is practically rusted." He pointed to the piece. It was summer now. Maybe he just hadn't been working on it. That was obvious. "No, you didn't see how much he loved that vehicle. Fiddled with it like a child. He couldn't have let it run like that," Oliver was sure. And though they didn't know exactly where the village was, they made their way around the forest and drove to the first settlement. As soon as they said who they were looking for, they were immediately shown Jacob's house and told that he had died last summer. "It's a shame we didn't visit him sooner," Selena sighed at the cemetery. "It's okay. This old man will stay with me forever right here." He patted his chest on the left side. "And I have." At this point, the little girl in her mom's arms cried, as if sensing her mood. "That's it. Time to go home." Oliver hugged the family. "Yes." His wife clung to him. Tom stood looking at the cross that stood on his grandfather's grave. "Can I borrow his snowmobile?" he asked his father. Who knows now? The man was surprised at such eagerness. They returned to the village, to the same house. Jacob had a daughter and granddaughter staying with him. "Hello." Tom came through the wicket door. "Hello." A young girl came out to him. The boy stood looking at her and was silent. She seemed so beautiful to him. "Well, ask her why you came." His father hurried him up. "Ah, yes," he told her. He told her that he could repair the equipment and, if necessary, return it to the family. She laughed, which made her even more beautiful. "I think someone will be coming here very often," Selena whispered to her husband. I noticed too. He looked at his son. He was falling in love for the first time. They all drove home together. Tom didn't take the snowmobile. They had agreed with William that he would build it right there in the woods, and she would help in any way she could. "Mom, I'm gone." He left the apartment. "Well, I've lived to be a bride," Selena said in the hallway. "Wait, you still have fiancés ahead of you," Oliver pointed at his daughter. "I hope it won't happen very soon." She laughed and went to the kitchen. In the evening, the mother and father arrived. They were visiting the children often now. They helped with their granddaughter and just wanted to have some fun. "Daughter, why didn't you tell us where and with whom you went?" her father asked her. "What?" Selena was stunned. She didn't expect that question to come up after all these years. "Well, from Sam. He called me then," the man admitted. "What did he say?" She was really curious. "Said you'd met some prisoner who'd done time for causing the death of his girlfriend. He didn't get much time. It was proved he was only vicariously liable. His father didn't look at her." That was all in the past. Selena, at this point, regretted not asking anyone back then what John's fault was. "Okay, no more pestering," got up, and left the room to her parents' room. But there was one silver lining to the story. If she hadn't left with him then, she never would have met Oliver, and he's the most wonderful man she's ever met.